Magick.me is the world's greatest school for magic, meditation, and mysticism. You can learn everything there, from chaos magic to hermeticism to meditation to how to supercharge your finances and take absolute control of your destiny. In short, you get all of the tools you need to turn chaos into beautiful, scintillating order and master your life. It's incredible. You've probably heard me talk about it on the show quite a lot. But check it out. It's growing fast. And I just want to say, if you're confused about where to start, because I have so many courses there, the Adept Initiative is the place to go. The Adept Initiative is the flagship course on magick.me, and it contains everything you need to know to master the most profound ancient techniques of changing your consciousness and the most modern and cutting-edge tools and systems for absolutely turning your life into a masterpiece. You're really going to dig it. Go check it out, and I will see you in class. It's magick.me, magick.me. Israel-Palestine.
Israel-Palestine? I gave a tweet about it. I don't know. I don't want to... People can say it's simple. Nothing's simple in this world. Everything's connected.
Yeah.
But all I had to say in my tweet was, I beg of you, every single soldier who can, you take some dirt and you put it in your weapon and you disable your weapon and you walk home. Okay? Your parents miss you. Your family misses you. Just stop. It's in the end, it comes down to the person that's there doing it. You're like the individuals. In the end, it's not this government, that government. You just say, fuck you, government. You know, I'm not going to fucking Vietnam or whatever. I'm just not. Fuck you. If you kill me now, at least I die for peace. You know? I don't know.
That's a good point.
That's where I am with it. It's too horrifying.
I actually like that a lot because I think we've talked about the Bhagavad Gita before. That's like when, I know we've talked about this where Krishna is to Arjuna, like, what's the big deal? You're going to die in bed anyways. Like, go to war, go fight. It's your duty. But like what you just said is like, well, it fulfills all the same criteria, but you basically go and die for peace. Now, this is easy to say on a podcast, but it's an interesting idea.
Well, I think we need a lot more conscientious objection. It's fucked up.
My dad was a conscientious objector in the Vietnam War. He did it the legal way. He didn't draft dodge it. They did selective service and sent him to work with the poor or something like that in California. So it's possible. I don't know about it in Israel. I don't think it's possible in Israel. But
no, wait. I mean, no, but that's the thing. I mean, in the end, it just has to come down to like, no.
Yeah.
Like, no, actually, it's like, Putin, drive me to the border. Then I'll dismantle my gun and I put my hands up and I can, maybe I'll make my way over to Germany or someplace.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think
fuck, just leave these hellholes that are fucking you up. The problem is, and it's like, now we're getting into the Palestine thing. It's like, I feel for Palestinians because they've been used, in my opinion. They've just been used ever since
the English, ever since the
British.
Yeah, since the British.
For everybody. And
or the Turks, the Turks.
They're just trying to hang on. I mean, like, God, Jesus. It's like people are tearing down, signs of Jewish people. It's like, I'm sorry. It's like, like the Arabs that were associated with that area actually were aligned with the Nazis before. So, like, let's just...
Has that been proven? Because I know that Netanyahu was doing kind of Hasbro propaganda. He actually got into a lot of trouble for it in Israel, saying that Hitler wasn't going to kill the Jews. It was the Palestinians convinced him to do it, which is just really silly.
No, I don't know about that.
Okay.
But I think it was just like who people aligned with. It's like, if you were in that region, it was sort of really wasn't your war. It's like people are coming into your territory and giving you ultimatums and shit, so it's like, well, do we join the Nazis or do we join the British? the British are down there with dealing with those people in like they were the Egypt area.
Palestine. I don't know this history. So Palestine, there was like some Nazi connection during the war. Or something. We were working with Germans.
Well, there was no Palestine yet, right? Like this,
okay.
It wasn't such a. I mean, it was British Palestine, but that included Lebanon and all this area. Like it was a completely different piece of land. And then, as usual, I mean, my opinion is everyone should blame the British. The British set up these fucking
that's
situations.
Who, that's who Izan blames for it. Izan's like,
just
this is all the British.
Africa, every single country. It's like the thing was balance of power or some shit like that. But instead, they cut across all kinds of naturally existing territorial boundaries, pre-existing ones. So now you've got all these people. It's like so-and-so gets balance of power, but the 40% get shat on or whatever, instead of just saying like, no, that's the country of the Igbo and that's the Ashanti territory, and everybody pretty much knows. And we can draw some,
which is what not didn't happen in the 90s.
That people wanted.
That's
British are psycho. They fucked everything up.
Yeah, well, the legacy of imperialism is so.
Oh God.
Like the British Empire, I think, is responsible for something like 19 million deaths. Most of which were like induced famine in Bengal and like the Mau Mau uprising. And most of the files are still sealed from that. We don't know what the British Empire did because the files were all destroyed when the empire fell apart. So we don't know who they tortured. They invented concentration camps, by the way. People forgot that. I think in South Africa, somewhere for the Boers, the British invented the concentration camp. And the Americans started eugenics and all this crazy racist, fake pseudoscience eugenics and all that. And the Nazis took it from. So it's kind of like one of these things where, yes, the Nazis are one of like the worst, possibly the worst moment of world history. But like you said, everything's connected. Like, let's be, like, let's not just say, it's kind of like the US. It's like everything bad that's ever happened, including all the way back to the 18th century, is Donald Trump's fault. So it's like, no. The stuff that Donald Trump has done while he was in office is definitely his fault. But just that.
No. I still find his uncle seizing Tesla's materials to be fascinating.
Is that real? Tell that story, please.
I've never found any other citation any place about the series of events.
I just saw a meme about that. It was like Fred Trump stole Tesla's technology. What
no, it wasn't that. It's not his dad. It was like his uncle.
Okay.
It was in the NSA or something, like back in the day, very early.
Although you have to admit, my uncle
died, because he lived on American soil and Tesla had no relatives or something like that. Like, so they just were like, well, and they went into his apartment and just grabbed everything.
Did they own the hotel where he died or something?
Oh, they probably. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. And they probably would have owned some of the apartments in that building to keep an eye on the guy.
Yeah, he died in
the whole thing.
The place was called the New Yorker Hotel that he died in. It's weird because I was just reading about this last night.
The other guy, the Theremin guy, as well, who was from the same time period, basically. Like he ended up getting recruited. He was, I guess, a little later, but he ended up getting smuggled back to Russia, as I recall.
Who did?
Theremin. He was another scientist. He invented the capacitance detection system that they use for the musical instrument, the theremin.
I'm asking AI about this. This is like this is the budget version of Pull It Up, Jamie. I just asked GPT. Okay, wait. So let's see. Give me the list of all people or organizations that have owned the New Yorker Hotel where Tesla died. All right. Pull it up, GPT. It's browsing. Okay, well, AI is working. That actually kind of weirdly makes sense, though. That's odd. Okay, let's see. The original ownership.
There's so much. I've been so up on the UFO thing lately because it's just like so. So it's like I think I have to throw away my whole octopus thing, which I really am sad about.
What's the octopus thing?
Well, that was my theory like 2 years ago on aliens, was that they were hyper advanced cephalopods. And that's why they could look like all kinds of things, because they could just morph their face, because they're octopi. So they're just really advanced octopus. So they could look like anything they want, basically.
Okay.
And they're really smart. They're tool users.
You saw like 5 years ago, there was like a paper that came out saying that octopuses were aliens.
It's quite, they have a completely different, like they have like, what is it? It's like an internal transgenics ability. So they can like literally move around chunks of their DNA and like restructure. It's insane.
We need to figure out how, like, imagine figuring out how to do that for people. I'm sure Jen mentioned this at some point. It's like, yeah, like what if we could like, you know, like get that ability? Now you think, yeah, that would be fun.
Right. Yeah.
That'd be great.
Your body is whatever you want it to be.
Okay, check this out. So here's what AI said. I was able to find a speculative connection between the Trump family and the New Yorker hotel relating to Nikola Tesla, who died in the hotel, and Donald Trump's uncle, John G. Trump, who reviewed Tesla's paper after his death. However, this connection does not pertain to the ownership of the hotel or business relationships between the whole hotel's owners and the Trump family. Therefore, there isn't any concrete information to suggest that the Trump family had connections with the individuals. Okay, so
but that was only Trump, but the government of the NSA, CIA could have owned the building.
Yeah, and that we could not prove. It was supposedly...
then they do that through some shell organization, because the whole thing's done like in the Watchmen through Pyramid, you know, Acme Corporation or whatever thing.
So it was originally built in 1929 by Matt Canner and was operated by somebody named Ralph Hitz until his death in 1940, at which point Frank L. Andrews took over the operation. So the owner died 3 years before Tesla, and it was given to a new person. So let's see who this was. Who was Frank L. Andrews? By the way, okay, here's the issue with AI. The website that it's cited for that information about John D. Trump is the Unification Church Community blog. And the first thing on this is the Tesla Trump moon connection, New Yorker hotel. And it's just...
Oh, wait, I didn't know the moon connection.
Reverend Sun Myung Moon. What? Okay, this is what this crazy conspiracy site says. If you didn't know, the New Yorker hotel is related to Tesla and his plan to save the world from greedy monopolies. Tesla commissioned the construction of the New Yorker hotel. What? Tesla did his last 10 years of experiments there. The electricity generator is still working in the basement. Allegedly...
I heard about that. I heard he installed a monster generator.
Wow. Lucky them. Allegedly, Tesla and John G. Trump were involved in the design of the hotel. What we do know for sure is that the hotel was Tesla's secret tower experiment. He didn't die in the hotel room. He was working in the basement. Okay, but then they go into Nikola Tesla's ancestors, you should also get aware of, you should also get aware of Trump's ancestors' work with Reverend Sun Myung Moon in the spirit world. Okay, article discarded. Okay, opinion discarded.
Yeah, and exactly. We're fully mired in the information avalanche.
That's really scary, actually. GPT-4 is pulling information from like weird cult blogs. So you double check your AI info. Jeez.
Yeah, no, a great use that I heard for the AI, and I haven't heard about what's come out of this or for that kind of thing, was, the Black Vault?
Which one?
It was in blackvault.org or com, the green. It's this guy, he's got all these UFO papers and FOI, like Freedom of Information Act releases, and like a lot of UFOs, but other stuff. And Kurt Jaimungal, who's on Theories of Everything. He does the Sciencey podcast. He's another Canadian. And he was interviewing him, but it was like, we should get a machine to go through all these papers, because a lot of them are, but this is like Majestic 12 type stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of Freedom of Information Act stuff that's come. But
so they fed it into AI?
Exactly, because a lot of it was typed out at period, and it's like by these hacks, and it's like
that is an awesome use for AI.
To just analyze that and also make it into a searchable database. So all you have to do is type Andrews Air Force Base, and every single citation it's what HTML was actually initially designed for, right? It's like we're having to redo that because the initial idea was the hypertext thing. It's like every word would be a link to an idea or a phrase or something, like it's got its citations all built into itself all over the place.
Yeah, by the way, I was reading last night that apparently that was part of the original plans like, I think people were coming up with plans for personal computers in Silicon Valley in the 70s. And everyone thought it would never happen. And it was just this total like crazy moonshot idea. But part of the original plans for a personal computer was a hypertext before the web was even created. So, yeah.
Well, you can see that it's like a way of self-organizing, sort of like relating ideas, that we're now sort of running all this information through machines again so that they encompass it all and build that structure also for the connectedness.
Do you know what K means clustering is? Do you know what K means clustering is?
No, if it has to do with statistics, I ignored it.
It does. It's super interesting. It's super interesting, though. It's kind of like one of the
two-tailed t-test. I was like, okay, I'm done.
Wait, like the Voight-Kampff test?
Yeah.
This is how I know you're not a replicant. And I might be a replicant because I do know what K means. It's like, yeah, you just never know. We could both be replicants. We might not actually be the same people who met in New York. We might have both been replaced.
That's true.
By control. You just never know.
No,
I'm sure some people that would explain a lot for some people.
But all you can believe is whatever you believe. So
that's true. So K-means clustering is you feed a metric ton of data into a computer, and then you just tell it to look for patterns. And what it will do is it will find clusters of information. So for instance, it'll like you feed it, like a classic example would be like you feed it 200,000 credit card transactions, and then it'll come back with something like, or fraudulent credit card transactions. And then it will come back. This is actually people use it for this. And then it'll come back with, after it runs, something like, well, there's this one cluster of credit card transactions that were all made from the same, in the same area around the same time. Or they were all made with this one, like,
You don't have to predetermine the parameter.
You just give it like 4 or 5 sets of data to look through. Or so basically, just imagine a spreadsheet with 100,000 rows and like 4 columns.
Like one of these Lie group things, associations just from the available data. It's like, this was the time, whatever the data is, and it just looks for closest matches.
So the cool thing about it is it's unsupervised learning. So it just looks for patterns without you pre-biasing it, telling it what to look for. You just say, look for patterns, and it finds them. And then, so that would be really interesting to do with all that alien stuff.
It would. Yeah. I mean, I think the whole issue, I don't know. I mean, at this point, it's like, well, the government's essentially said that something whack exists, and we don't really want to say what it is because we can't. I mean, my take is, of course, the darkest, and is totally like, okay, they've had giant flying platforms in the sky, the US, since probably late 60s, because Alexander de Seversky, who was highly rated general, I think I mentioned this on a previous program, but he was a highly rated general, and he pioneered ionicraft, like ionic drives, way early. And
what is that? What is that?
Back then.
What's an ionic drive?
Where you have like high voltage differentials across, usually you have a wire and then some area, and it creates a flow of air from one charge to the other charge.
Okay.
And there's a weird trick about leveraging voltages that there's an innate voltage to the world of about 100 volts per meter. It's the voltage differential between the sky and like the ionosphere and the Earth. And the clouds build that up in the water, and then you get lightning bolts because they've built up a bunch of charge. Usually it's so dispersed that it can't build up any place in a localized area. But then you get a thunderstorm, and now you've got all this charge in one place. So anyways, and then you get lightning bolts. But his thing was, well, if you get 100 volts per meter, so at 100 meters, if we build something 100 meters tall, we get 10,000 free volts of differential. If we build something a kilometer tall, which sounds absurd, but now you have 100,000 volts free differential between the top and the bottom. Oh. So now you just put a capacitor in between to block the charge from being able to flow. And you've got one side of your object has a, whatever it was, 100,000 volt difference than the other. And then you leverage that to make your craft fly. And he had, he had thumbnailed this out, and he's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure we could build something about the size of an aircraft carrier floating in the sky, and we can launch airplanes off of it. And
Wow.
he talks about this, and this is like 1958, maybe something like that. Late 50s,
well,
maybe.
Now we
60s.
know for sure. I mean, I immediately thought of stealth bombers, and like we know now for sure they do have technology to camouflage planes in the sky. Like, you know, like they're over 29 palms, you know. It's like they'll be.
Oh yeah. No, they've had that for like almost 10 years now. They started it with the tanks.
They've said. So like,
exactly.
like an invisible. So you're saying there could be like an invisible UFO aircraft carrier. I mean, there could.
That's what I suspect all the large triangles are.
Well, if
they seem very mechanical and therefore human. All the ones that are totally mind-blowing instead, it's like weird globs, like one that I saw that looked like a bunch of mercury floating in the air, only it was like dripping liquid metal at the bottom. And then it had two friends hanging around it too, or flashing lights that just seem because anybody that cites the U.S. government, it's like, no, I'm sorry. It's like UAPs go back a long time. Since there's been a printing press, occasionally somebody says, we had this crazy shit happen to us the other day.
So meaning it's been happening forever. Or did they write it down before the press? No, but
it's been happening for centuries.
Yeah.
It certainly is not. There's no way of ascribing UAPs to any human technological development. That's just absurd. Or it would have to be Lemurians who had it before and are hiding out for some obscure reason, which doesn't make any sense to me. To me, the logical thing is it's a big universe. Some people, someplace, maybe a few people, various places, found some insane trick.
This one weird
for getting
trick.
Places really fast, however they do it. It's vaguely possible in a model I have that there's essentially three phases to the universe. Okay? Play along with me for a sec.
Mm-hmm.
So an electron is just all one phase here. And a neutrino has three different, like there's the electric field, the electrical field, essentially. Like there's a pure charge field.
I wish
charge in the line.
Just to jump in real quick.
Start moving the charge in a line.
I wish people who are hearing this could see it, because Caleigh is holding up a model of this. Actually, it's like what 6 yellow balls on.
Well,
it's like an XYZ. It's like an XYZ axis.
Exactly.
With yellow balls at the
axes. End. It's a Cartesian construction. But I'll build this in front of you and you can describe. I've got some W videos.
Okay.
But quarks come in fractional charges. It's a weird thing about quarks. You need 3 fractional charges to complete something. So this got like 2 fractional charges. Now, usually they're not shown as axes in any diagram you will ever see. But if you just play along and say, okay, well, this is a fractional charge, this is a fractional charge, we need 3 of them. So now we have 3 fractional charges, 3 axes of charge. All of a sudden, hey, doesn't that look like this annoying sort of like Cartesian universe that we live in? Why are there 3 dimensions? Maybe it's just because of this. Like there's 3 angles that things can push against each other.
Explain this more. So what you're holding up. So what I'm seeing right now is you're holding up 3 sticks that you've arranged in an XYZ axes, and they're short. They're about the size of matchsticks. And at the end of each, so just imagine 3 matchsticks, one going vertical, one horizontal, and the third depth. And then at the end of each of these matchsticks is a blue ball about the size of a grape. So
yeah, the blue balls just represent in my picked model right now. Well, we'll call it positive charge now, actually.
Okay, so you're using this to demonstrate quarks, fractional charges on quarks?
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's say you want to make a proton. So actually, a proton takes 2 up quarks. An up quark has two positive charges.
Okay.
And another up quark has 2 more positive charges.
So you're holding basically two XY axes. So
yeah, exactly.
There's 4 grapes on each, vertical and horizontal.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm probably not describing this very well. I should just let you roll with your theory.
Yeah. So just imagine instead that it's axes. So there's 4 of them. So now you take them and you go like, okay, so and wait, and there's a down 2. 2 ups, 1 down. But so we got 4 blue and 1 yellow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine the yellow and the blue and make a green one.
I'm just reminding you that no one is going to be able to see what you're doing with your hands.
I know.
Yeah, okay.
But what we just did is took a fractional positive charge and a fractional negative charge and turned it into a little tiny photon that is trapped over its own orbit.
I assure you this is super cool what I'm seeing.
And this is a Higgs, we would call the Higgs.
Okay.
And that's the mass. This is what gives things its mass. It's a little photon. And because the photon is in orbit, you get angular momentum, circular angular momentum, because things spinning on a line do that.
That's the Higgs boson?
This is in my model.
Okay.
This will be the Higgs boson. And then surrounding it, you have 3 more axes of positive charge, which is your proton part, the positron, with a mass in the middle. So now it's a proton.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So when things fall apart, or with electrons, there's 3 so-called generations of electron. There's a regular electron, then there's the muon that everyone is probably heard about now. And it's like an electron that's somehow more electron. Assume
I don't know anything, because I actually don't. I've heard muon, but I don't know what it is, and I don't. Maybe my listeners are theoretical physicists. If you are, super cool. I'm not. So explain it like I'm 5.
Right, but okay. So you have an electron which is negative charge, and we'll just leave it at that. A muon is somehow still the same amount of negative charge, but has twice as much mass density to it somehow.
Okay.
While still only having that same amount of charge.
What weird. Okay.
And then the tau particle is even more. And each of these generations is like an exponential increase in mass. Like electron, let's just call it electron. If an electron was 1, a muon is going to be like 200.
Are these things that have been observed, or are they just kind of like inferred from equations?
Particle way, however,
Hadron Collider,
look these things up.
The Large Hadron Collider.
And then the tau particle is like even heavier, but still only has 1 charge. It's heavier than electrons somehow, but still doesn't have any more electricity.
This is like Alice in Wonderland.
I know it is. So my thought is that, well, wait, what if there's like 3 different phases, 1 for each of these axes? And the electron is one of these happening. And then the muon would be like another one stuffed inside of this, which would increase the pressure in the space, essentially, which would account for this increase in the mass without there being an increase in charge. And then the tau would be another, another phase relationship. So there's sort of like 3 of them compressed, all running 1/3 against each other, if you know what I mean. Like, let's say the electron charge was up here, then the tau charge would be here, and the muon charge would be here, so that they can all sort of share this space at the same time. So if aliens come from another dimension, maybe they come from that phase relationship to us. Like that would mean there would be
that makes sense.
3 very distinct.
That checks out.
Like what is a charge here would appear as a rotation in their dimension. So we would seem like weird ghosts, maybe.
Yeah, isn't there something with quarks where they like rotate through dimensions or some craziness like that?
Well,
they blip in and out, they do spooky action at a
time,
distance and all that.
Where you have to rotate, like at a certain point, you go past infinity, and then you get to start from 0 again, coming as if you started again from 0.
This is all awesome. I really wish I knew more of this, and I should teach myself more of this at some point. My knowledge of balls flying in space pretty much begins and ends with Kabbalah, so that's occupied so much of my brain. But I think go ahead.
Just speaking of the Kabbalah, I actually there's this thing, the Wolfram Physics Project, and they've got this way of making graphs and stuff. And
did you know that AI GPT-4 has a plugin that will utilize the Wolfram Alpha database? So
Yeah, I heard
you
it.
can query it.
I don't know how to use Wolfram Alpha well, but I know that if you know how to use it well.
Well, this means I've never used it. This means you don't need to know how to use it. You basically just like click a button that says Wolfram Alpha plugin, and then you just type your question.
Okay, yeah, because it's got a great database. Also, because it basically does this sort of association stuff as well. It's really good at like tying together. You know, you want to do data maps of things and stuff like that. It's excellent at doing searching and structuring of, you know, world maps to put out all the capitals that have whatever, something, things like that.
Okay.
This is what I hear.
It's super interesting. Like that actually makes, I was trying to follow, and then suddenly it kind of clicked. And by the way, I don't know anything about physics, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who listen to this who do. So if they're interested in your work, where do they go to look at it?
They should go to my YouTube channel, probably is the best place. And it's totally nutty. What can I say? I have a totally different take. I think that the hydrodynamics of a dielectric superfluid will self-evolve all quantum field theory. Because I just saw a paper recently that showed how Brownian motion, apparently random motion, in water spontaneously will start to form vortices as a way of conserving the energy. They'll turn into a bunch of little rotating places that have the energy. So heat is a bunch of swirls for the most part. It's not like, whereas you were used to seeing it as like these particles that are going like bing, 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 like a bunch of ping pong ball. But more what happens, it seems, is things will conserve the energy and instead just swirl and swirl and swirl, as you can see.
It's like a loading wheel.
Exactly, and it just loads and loads and loads. And
I've never heard that before. That's it. That's super interesting.
Because you're building it up as like a flywheel does. You're building it up as rotational momentum, as a way of conserving it in space.
Huh. So that the
still
energy,
having the same energy.
Whoa. So that the energy is just not lost. It's basically just
it's not lost. It's conserved.
So they're basically and particles are doing this.
Oh, like clusters of particles. It turns into this. Yeah, probably according to the density of the fluid, et cetera, et cetera. There's going to be like Reynolds values that determine the size of the vortice. And
so
blah, blah, blah.
Basically, a cluster of particles will just sit there stand there treading water essentially until they need to do something.
Clusters of particles, yeah. I mean, that's how they store heat, sort of, right?
So then, that checks out with like, object in motion will stay in motion. So that's like how they save the energy in their part of the world. I mean, I'm using super non-scientific terms because they don't know the scientific terms, but
but
this is appropriate for a podcast test.
It's conserving localized energy, and it's just like it's way more efficient to do it that way, right? Than like, why would you keep on bouncing into things?
Wow.
It's because as soon as you bounce into something, you bounce off at an angle.
So go ahead.
Like a development of a rotation is a very spontaneous thing in a lot of condensed matter events.
So basically, like the kind of pinball model of like, it's just these like balls flying in space hitting each other in the Large Hadron Collider, as I call it. So that's basically nonsense, like that, or rather that's from like visualizations or something. Like that's how they've taught it, but it's not actually.
Yeah, that's like, I'd say like realistically, that's sort of like an 18th century, 19th century.
Wow. So, that means that people are being taught 18th, 19th century views in school.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things, because I mean, I don't know. Like, I really think it's like in the next 5-10 years, education needs to be completely revamped. For instance,
absolutely,
Pascal's triangle, which is just this, like it's this triangle you make by just having ones, and then you add the 1 to the 1, and it's like, okay, that's 2. And that's a 2 plus a 1, so that's a 3 in this column. And you just make this large triangle that has all these numbers distributed in it. There is so much hidden in that pattern about all kinds of things. Like, it's just mind-boggling that there's certain simple principles and certain simple constructions that we could teach kids. Like, I don't even do matrix multiplication, which they're teaching kids now as sort of de rigueur because of the computer thing and leveraging it for quantum calculations, like simple bit analysis and error correction, right? So, but I mean, I just think we need to revamp a bunch of things because a few simple principles will get you so far.
Yeah.
Like they will take you very, very, very far.
Well, the public education system, which is, I want to caveat this by saying the public education system is, because by the way, I've criticized the education system a lot and I felt bad about it afterwards because I realized that people who are teachers might hear me and think that I'm talking about them. I'm not. The education system is full of incredible teachers who are doing above and beyond, often buying materials out of their own money and like because they don't have funding and things like this.
No,
so there's incredible educators.
They're given the proper tools is the thing. Yeah. I don't think they're given the proper tools and the purpose. Let's face it, they're trying to do their best, but the way all of society is structured, schools are holding pens for children. They're intentionally way slower than the kids need them to be because we have to hold these kids in this, holding
basically
while their parents are off.
Keep them in their containment unit until their hormones are more regulated.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I was a terrible kid, like I did great at school and my absences were usually 2 or 3 times greater than my marks.
Okay.
Like,
yeah. Well, that's the really dangerous thing you have to watch out for with smart kids. They're really smart and they get bored easily. And when they get bored easily, they start tinkering with things. And when you're a teenager, that can be pretty destructive. It certainly was for me. So.
Oh, yeah. Here it is. Demonstrating vortices as Brownian particles in turbulent flows. And basically, it's this description of how this, like, basically little vortices will evolve, self-evolve. It's on my Twitter thing.
So,
but how these structures will start to evolve. And if you had a superfluid, that means basically superfluid means make everything happen for free to its most extreme is what it
sounds
means.
Good.
It's just like everything just goes to its attractor, like its mathematical attractor point or whatever, like either it blows up or it dives down to zero. It's just like, that's what gravity is. Everything is rushing in the universe is speeding. Like right now, who knows how fast we're going if you had some kind of absolute measure. Like how fast are we heading towards, like right now, how fast are we objectively heading towards the maw of the giant, black hole at the middle of our galaxy? Like we must be zooming at like millions of miles an hour or something, right? We don't notice. Thankfully.
There's so many things that we don't notice and take for granted that are necessary for our existence. Like even that, So there's 2 like branching conversation trees or branches off from this conversation that I see to pursue. One of them is is aliens phasing in and out of reality. The other is the education system. Please pick the one that is most exciting to you.
Well, to me, really, the education system is probably the most exciting.
Okay. Well,
that's what my whole life in, pretty much.
So you've worked in the educational system.
Well, peripherally, because that's where I live, at the periphery always.
Okay.
So it was like I worked after school programs, generally as art specialist, and science like focused activities. And then I worked for 13 years at Spiral Garden, which was an arts-based rehabilitation program for kids with disabilities. And I ended up doing artistic director there for a few years until I got unceremoniously booted for transitioning, which was like the weirdest, least likely place to have happened, but whatever.
Yeah. It's a real bummer.
I don't have time to, look forward. Always just keep your head forward.
For sure. I was thinking about...
If you start looking back, then you get caught in one of these vortices.
Yeah, that is kind of how it feels. That's interesting.
Yeah, and then you're stuck. And you're stuck in
that
this...
That is how it feels. That's what therapy is like. You're like constantly going back, trying to figure out what was wrong in childhood. It's like, well, why not just live your life and go forward, Instead of spending 40 years in therapy trying to figure out this, that, or the other. Well, I shouldn't. I'm also not a mental health professional, so please don't take what I'm saying as anything serious other than me just like spouting off in the moment. But I think that is interesting.
Yeah, everybody should do whatever they feel is necessary for their own health.
100%. And on that note, I was thinking in terms of the educational system, like we know it was invented in the 19th century, and it was based around the agricultural cycle so that kids could help with the harvest. That's why there's a summer vacation. None of that is relevant anymore. China is school year round, and we have this weird summer vacation. But also, like, we just know so much more about pedagogy. We know how people learn. We know that there's a lot of neurodivergence among people, for instance. Like, not all brains are the same. They didn't know that then. Now we do. We know about learning styles. We know getting kids into nature instead of in a classroom is amazing. Like all of this stuff, we just know so much more. I think it probably is at the point where we should maybe consider rethinking from scratch rather than trying to modify what's there. Plus with internet, AI, all of this, I know I have a friend who's works with kids, and she's an educator. She actually likes AI and AI generated essays because she says that it frees the kids up to do other stuff, which is what the same thing it will do for them as adults. So like even AI, it's like, well, like, yeah, you can like prevent kids from using AI, but then you're not teaching them the real world at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's just like, and I mean, a perennial problem is that, and I didn't even read, it's one of these things you just sort of don't think about, but I mean, there really is there are people who don't have internet. There are people in America who don't have internet.
Lucky.
Well, in some ways, I mean, like, and I'm not talking about people that intentionally don't have internet, but there are people who basically who don't feel like they can afford to spend the $50 a month or $100 a month it takes.
Yeah.
Because everything's like that.
And buy a computer and camera, all that.
And all that. And it's like, I really think it's like, whatever happened to that? Like, I remember back in the bad old reality hackers days and early internet, it's like, if Arthur C. Clarke's vision was right, there would have been one bunch of satellites put up, and it would have been the World Telecommunication System satellites. And everybody can use them, and we'll add bandwidth and shoot them up and whatever as we go along. But it's like this whole thing that's compartmentalized it through privatization that's just like made it so that it exacerbates hierarchy at all points. That's all it is. It's like capitalism and the structure that it goes along with. Unfortunately, it's got a lot of upsides, but the downside is that it basically what it does is only raises the peak and doesn't even move the periphery.
I don't think that that's true in the sense that, compare how people live.
How many people do a search now? 1990, how many people had like food, whatever, died of starvation that year?
In the world or in America?
Pick it. I don't care. Pick one.
Okay. What I was going to say is, if you look at the quality of life at the low end in America now versus 100 years ago, there's no comparison. I don't think even the richest people were living as well as probably middle class people now. So I know I'm certainly I'm not a Reaganomics guy at all. That should probably be fucking obvious. I don't believe in trickle down economics. I think they don't actually do that, but there is a rising tide.
How many homeless people are there in America though?
Okay, that's all right. That's a different question. Okay.
Well, no, so that's the same question.
Okay. Well, we can do both, but
they're the lowest of weight.
Which one you want me to ask? I'm going to ask AI now. So you want to do starvation?
No, but let's go back to just this chat because it was totally accidental. But as we were saying, when you said it's like, no, but the lowest get raised up. And then I said, what about the homeless? And then it was like, well, that's a different issue.
Okay, so then you want to ask AI, like, I think you can even graph it at this point, just like homeless.
No,
rates.
But my point is that the homeless is the lowest, and the homeless is essentially, it's like, you can just measure. Actually, that's the good measure. It's like, how many homeless people were there in 1990 and how many homeless people are there in 2020?
We have to look at that proportionally by population.
We can do that proportionally.
Okay, so let me ask this. And so let's see, how do we phrase this question? Okay, let's see.
Percentage of homeless.
Make a graph, because we can do this now, of homeless homelessness in America from 1950 to now,
per capita.
And okay, so the x-axis should be year, y-axis should be
homelessness per capita.
Percent of, per capita is percent of total population.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, let's see.
Yeah, education. I don't know. I'm big on sort of certificate process.
Okay, check it out. So it says, and please hold that thought. It requires historical data that detailed. Okay, it says the information available is somewhat fragmented and doesn't provide a clear year-by-year breakdown from 1950 to 2023, but here's a summary. Number one, in the 50s and 60s, homelessness declined to the point where researchers expected its near disappearance in the 1970s. Okay, all right. However, homelessness increased rapidly and drastically changed in composition during the 1980s. Now that we don't have causative information for, but I would hazard a guess it's Reagan-Thatcher policy. Yeah. Okay, in 2019, the national U.S. homelessness rate was 0.17%, or 171 persons per 100,000. In 2020, around 580,000 Americans were reported as homeless. In 2022, about 462 homeless individuals were living in the United States. Okay, so let's see. How okay, I'm just going to say, how would you...
flat percentage-wise in the last decade or so? Because it feels like the problem has been about the same since a little after the turn of the century.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you. Let's see.
I love being able to say that too. I think it's so funny.
Turn of the century. Yeah, it is funny. Also, I like saying that we're in the 20s. How would you describe the general trend over time? Has it improved, stabilized, or gotten worse? Is what I'm going to ask it, and then we'll hopefully have our answer. But it's probably looking at Christian cult blogs for the info here. So. The general trend of homelessness from the 50s to the present seems to have fluctuated. Okay, so it improved from the 50s to the 70s. Now, that was the time that LBJ was doing his Great Society thing in the 60s. And the 50s
Communist.
The 50s were, well, no, he killed a lot of communists in South Vietnam. Genocide,
it's
murder.
funny, yeah. It's like they're running this communist system here in the United States with all this LBJ junk, you know.
What do you mean? Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Public education? What the hell?
Pinkos. So yeah.
Of course I'm joking because I'm like so communist it would just upset people.
Well,
I'm like
Christian.
I'm Christian communist is what I am. I'm like
what you're Christian. How are you Christian? What?
No, I'm not Christian, but I just mean I'm communist in a collectivist.
I would accept and love you.
Christian way.
I would accept and love you if you were born again, but still.
No. You know, hey, I can love Jesus and Jesus loves me. I don't have to worship the dude. Jesus does not care whether I worship.
He probably
Jesus.
doesn't.
What Jesus wants me to do is go into my cupboard and grab some food and find somebody and give it to them.
Thank you. Yeah. Imagine if Christians in America just did that, like actually followed what the guy said.
This church I go to, it's funny. Okay, so my ex, who you know, whose name I won't mention only because I love her and I don't want to get in any trouble because I'm an idiot. So anyways, so she has a young one now, 2.5-ish. And she got this gig as music director at this church in Toronto. So we go to church every Sunday, pretty much, or every other Sunday.
Wow, that must be interesting.
It's cool, but I mean, the church we go to...
Is this like a liberal Unitarian type?
Oh my God, it's like, no American should ever come up to Canada unless you're woke. We'll just annoy you so badly.
Is it true? I'm going to come back to the homelessness thing, but is it true that now they're encouraging suicide for poverty in Canada? Is this a real thing? Or has this been like completely blown out of proportion?
I think it's been blown out of proportion. I don't actually know details. Let me say, if I walked into a place right now and said I wanted to commit suicide because life is worthless and look what the hell's going on around the world, and please, it's like I've already lived 60 years. It's not going to get any better, that's for sure. So I got the best of this planet, you know, like I lived through the 70s and 80s. We were riding high.
Yeah.
I'm
Rub it
not
in. Rub it in.
I'm not. Yeah, I know. I'm not a boomer. I'm one of those cuspers right after boomers, which sucks for work because the boomers.
So you're a cusper also. I'm a cusper between Gen X and millennials. So that's interesting.
Exactly. And I'm a cusper from the boomers to Gen X. That's the thing. Why it's like, work. I don't know. I'll piece it together because all my older siblings already got all the good jobs. Well, which is like good jobs. It's like all those jobs that everybody works their whole life and has these boring and then it's like, you got your retirement and you just had no life at all.
So this is really interesting. I think maybe as a proxy issue, the homelessness thing. I'm not commenting on growing up in Canada because I have nothing to. I have no context whatsoever.
But Canada, it's just so. Let's face it. It's just so like. It's just all sweet up here.
Well, please remember that I was thrown out of your country by your government, so it's not always so sweet.
Okay, they aren't. Okay, they're such.
It's sweet up to a point. At which point, I feel like Canada. Tell me if this is true or not. My sense of Canada is that it's ultra sweet, ultra polite until you cross a certain threshold, in which case Canadians become unbelievably hellaciously cruel.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that checks out.
I think it's the same with a lot of northern peoples, actually. That like everyone's really cool and chill and everything like that. But it's like, but the thing is, what don't we like in Canada? We don't like violence.
Yeah.
Don't be an a-hole.
Americans love violence. We love it.
Don't cause trouble.
We love it.
What do we want to do? It's like we want to go do our things and have our dinners and
eat your poutine,
lives.
Go to Timmy Hortons.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm all about. It's like cancel that. Don't go to Tim Hortons. I know Tim Horton, whatever. Canada is owned by like 3 companies.
Is it?
Cara Foods here. They have like 7 brands. It's like one company owns like Swiss Chalet and Harvey's and Tim Hortons and I don't know what else. Like it's so like that here. I only mom and pop, that's like, it's always been, this is a lifelong policy of mine.
Only mom and pop.
Mom and pop, unless there's absolutely no choice. Sounds
like communism.
I'm a communist. Like I'm so communist. I'm grapes of wrath communist.
Oh, damn.
I'm like,
you're going hard. Okay.
I'm just like, fuck that.
You're
like,
IWW Wobbly's communist.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
What
cool.
the fuck?
Cool. Yeah.
How the fuck does Exxon make $19 trillion profit, and we're living in the shithole that made that $19 trillion profit made? Why is like that $19 trillion profit should go to all the places that are having effects of global warming or whatever.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, I mean that's the real carbon offsetting. It's like if you're going to extract,
tell you what, we'll just keep the trillions.
That's not bad.
Everything. You can have all the lower digits. we'll just keep the top 2 digits.
Yeah,
or 3 if it gets that big.
So I think we've actually hit on something really, really interesting. So I think this question of the homelessness trend is actually like an incredible jumping off point for a lot of stuff, because it really kind of demonstrates, it's actually kind of like interesting. Now, this is obviously theoretical. I don't know for sure, but it seems like it's kind of correlated. This is an interesting correlation to what's actually going on.
Correlated to everything.
Instead of the market, because people always judge economic success based on the market. Right. But as we all know, that really doesn't do anything for normal people. That's just the stockholders.
No, the market is the peak.
That's the companies selling and buying back their own stock.
Yeah. And the homelessness rate is like the bottom.
So this is really interesting because a lot of people have said, I think Bernie Sanders said at one point, like you shouldn't be looking at the stock market, you should be looking at wages. Right. But this is even more so, I think. Okay, so here's what it says. The trend since 1950 in America seems to have fluctuated, showing, and then I have a question. This sparks a question after this. It seems to have fluctuated, showing periods of improvement followed by periods of deterioration. So basically, it was improving so much from the 50s to the 70s that people thought it was going to disappear in 1970. Disappear, as in no more homelessness. Disappear, as in not like we have it under control, but disappear. And then, contrary to expectations, homelessness increased rapidly during the 1980s. AI dubs the 1980s deterioration. And then says from then we get 2000s to present has been stabilization / fluctuation. The data from the recent years shows a relatively stable yet slightly increasing number of homeless individuals from 2020 to 2022. Well, that's just 2020 to 2022. So it ignored the 90s and early 2000s. It says it's challenging to provide a definitive answer on whether the situation has overall improved, stabilized, or worsened due to the lack of continuous data. Okay, so here's my extrapolation. It says that the trends indicate that homelessness is a persistent issue that has experienced periods of both improvement and deterioration over the decades. So here's my extrapolation from this, and I could be completely wrong about it, but here's my snap reading, is that clearly, I mean, America won World War II. We had the bomb. We had all the money in the world. We had the Great Society, or Great Leap Forward was China, excuse me. Great Society in the, let's specify 1960s programs here. LBJ, Great Society, and then basically Reagan Thatcher ruined everything. And it sounds to me like they basically said it in some way that it's just been like that ever since. And the fact that there's data missing from the 90s to the present, I doubt that that's actually the case. But my conspiracy mind goes like, well, they must have stopped recording because the Republicans defunded that.
That was like the biggest tank, right?
Yeah.
It was like,
okay, so then I was wrong and you were right. And you were correct about this. And this is new. This kind of brings so like if we take homelessness as a proxy issue of basically just people giving a shit about society at all, it's like clearly they just okay, so this is like the core of my rage in a lot of ways, like through the 70s and then again in the 90s. It's like one of the reasons you were talking about Tesla. One of the things that has made me so persistently angry throughout my life is that there were so many good plans proposed in the 20th century that weren't done. And I love that, it's like you start criticizing how things are now and people are like, well, where's the solution? If you don't have a solution, you shouldn't raise your voice. It's like, well, we have thousands of solutions that people have already come up with, from the electric car to Tesla's alternating current to all, like O'Neill colonies, all these things. We had great plans that people just didn't do because of, short-term profit expectations, or maybe it's too long-term, whatever. They just didn't do it. And so it's almost like, if we look at homelessness data, it's basically like people just stopped caring after the 80s. They're like, we're just going to get ours. And I think it's worse now than it was in the 80s. It was certainly worse under Trump, that attitude.
Oh, yeah. No, No, who was a politician recently? It was like, or one of these right-wing people is like, okay, Jesus is a weak-ass cuck. Okay?
Wait,
this is their attitude.
This is their attitude. Yeah. That sounds about right. That sounds about right.
These are Christian soldiers, man. They got AR-15s. I mean, this is why I call it American. It's like it is so American Taliban.
I have lots of AR-15s. We love violence down here.
It's just like
you got to be evenly matched with the psychos if you want to live down here.
That's it. And that has been driven in movie after movie.
Oh yeah, Hollywood bears a lot. Hollywood needs to, and by the way, a lot of like pro Second Amendment people say this, and they're right. Hollywood needs to accept its share of the guilt for these school shootings. And I know that like since the 90s, like the idea talking about like video games and movies inspire violence is like really like uncouth in the 90s.
It's uncool. No, you can't do that, dude.
But because like I don't think Mortal Kombat, when people were talking about like Mortal Kombat didn't come on. But Hollywood has fostered, let me put it this way. Let's call it
stochastically, though.
Yes, yeah, like stochastic terrorism. Absolutely, it's like when people.
That's how they've done it. It's like by adding 10% more violence to every single film.
Yes,
you've added 10% more subconscious trauma to everything.
Yes, and also when people think about guns, let alone if a kid, God forbid, finds a gun. The things they have in their head are from Hollywood. They're not real. It's like with guns. It's like a gun. Like imagine like a lawnmower that like when you press a button, the lawnmower blade flies out and kills somebody and ruins the life of everyone that has ever met them, their parents, their friends, their loved ones, the community, the teachers, echoing out for like a blast radius, like an atomic bomb. The whole world, when they hear it, one person does one, a shooting does that have that effect. People are so numb to it now, but they forget like hundreds, maybe thousands of people's lives could be shattered, even with one person being shot. So it's like you have a lawnmower that shoots its blade and does a bit maybe more basic. You have like a metal box that a smaller piece of metal flies out of and does that. And that's basically what guns are. And all this like glamour and romance, the gun and all this, that's from Hollywood. And clearly they're not manufacturing guns, but they're creating the discourse around them. And I think that people really need to look at that. And I think as a magical thinker, you really cannot say that there's no link between showing a representation of something and then people trying to make it real. I don't think you can.
Okay. Yeah. If everybody in the world we unimagine the idea of a projectile weapon, we just unimagine it. There aren't any. I don't know. It's a lump of metal. Can we melt it down and turn it into something useful? Because right now,
I want
dumb lump of metal.
As I've said on this podcast many times, I am pro Second Amendment. I've done whole podcasts about it, so I'm not going to go off about it because people are probably sick of hearing about it. But
I think people should be free to have and use whatever they want.
People need to be able to defend themselves, including from repressive governments, which was the point of the Second Amendment. Now, beyond that, this image of like Hollywood has put this image into people's heads of like the Clint Eastwood, like the Robo Cowboy, like the guy with the gun who like sorts everything out with violence. It totally romanticizes violence. Like I recently went to go see Taxi Driver again in the big screen. Now that's a movie that has not aged well because it's like about every school shooter. And at the end they show like, Robert De Niro, spoiler alert, like, shoots this pimp. He does a vigilante killing. And then the end of the movie is just showing like society loves him and like he's become a hero. And there's some question as to whether he's imagining it or not. But the movie encourages that. And it's not just one movie. This has been going on since the beginning of
that Trayvon
cinema.
Martin thing? That's so like exactly that. George, what's his name? I hope I didn't
George
get
Zimmerman.
Yeah, that thing.
Yeah. What about that?
Well, just like that's so that kind of scenario. Only it wasn't even a pimp. It was just like a person, but it's just like this person having this that the people can't. It's not discourse. It's just like kill. Like those horrific shootings that happen. It's like some kids playing hide and seek knocks on the wrong door because two houses look the same and gets shot.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. In my mind, the appropriate use of a gun, the only appropriate use of a gun, only outside of military or police or whatever for a private citizen, is to prevent them or their loved ones from being killed when they have literally no other option. And that needs to be there, but you don't that's the use of it. It's not this video game insanity that they put out. And it's not a light thing. It's basically, I feel like it's the same kind of issue as, this is going to be controversial, but I feel like it's a similar issue to abortion, right? Which is like pro-abortion advocates, or pro-choice, are saying, nobody wants to do this. This is a traumatic thing. It fucks people's lives. Nobody wants to do this, but it needs to be available for when people need it, when they have no other choice. I feel the same way about Second Amendment.
Right. It's great. Have a gun. I mean, I've shot guns. I prefer bow and arrow, but that's good because it's like more fun. No. I like tradition, and so I mean, I love the idea of I used to do the survival, teach survival stuff. So it's like I love the idea of just finding a good branch, and it's like, no, I'm going to make my bow that way,
Oh,
But
nice.
I'm a super Luddite in so many ways. I can't wait to just ditch pretty soon. Go down to my place, maybe put up some solar panels on so that I can get communication, and then just eat roots and dig around and eat live
Nice.
off whatever I can grow locally. I totally think I'm still everybody take all your seeds of all your peppers. Every single time you buy a pepper, keep the seeds of that pepper. Every time you buy a squash, keep the seeds of the squash. Keep them around for a little ways. You could probably put them in the freezer. Most seeds don't mind. put them in the freezer. Then when you go for a walk someplace in a park nearby or some abandoned lot, just fling those seeds. If they stick, they're meant to be there. If they don't stick, then they're not meant to be there. But we can Eden up this place.
Like, oh, yeah.
There's no reason that every single piece of just random ass land is not covered in squash and pumpkins and sunflowers and tomatoes and beans. And we're being so stingy. In my opinion, it just occurred to me how stingy we're being against all the other animals on the planet. We keep all the food production within these pens, far away from people so that they have to pay for the food. We don't want people actually having free access to food. That would be dangerous because then they aren't counting on us anymore. So you have your food being grown in these giant corporate pens for efficiency. Anyways, and the animals want to go, and we're like poisoning the animals so they can't have any of the pumpkins because, man, we don't want to lose our 1% of our pumpkins to the animals. It's like we should be dropping these seeds all over the planet. We could have probably 3 or 4 times the biomass that we presently have. We could almost be back to, historical levels.
Do you know what seed bombs are? Seed bombs.
Oh yeah, seed bombs. Yeah, seed bombs.
Google it. People listening. Dude. Google seed bombs.
If it sticks, it sticks. If it doesn't stick, it doesn't stick.
Yeah.
Okay, you can be a purist about this and that, about ecologies. The truth of history is things migrate.
Yeah.
What sticks, sticks. People that like a place, and people that don't like a place, don't like a place. The corporatization, that's a thing. I mean, it's like the prison. Oh, that would be another thing. It's like, I know, let's judge a country by the per capita in jail.
That's a good, okay, all right. This I need to, okay.
You don't want to see that.
Okay, this reminds me of what I was going to ask. So right now I have the info about homelessness pulled up. I'm just going to ask it one question. Compare this to the rest of the world during this time.
Okay, yeah.
Or we could just do Canada, but I mean, I
don't know how Canada's got like we're a communist country here. So
until you're not, because yeah.
No, but I mean, it's true. It's like if I was completely destitute, and if you are completely destitute in Canada, I don't think there's no place you could go and you could just be like, I need food. Somebody will give it. You will get it.
That's beautiful. However, I will caveat, because I realized when I was in Canada, one of the reasons why that is because Canadians are so ungodly rich from all the oil. So like I came up with the phrase, socialism is capitalist privilege. That pissed them off.
Yes.
But it is.
It truly is.
Proof is Canada and the Nordic countries. So
no,
rich
totally.
as hell.
It's
once you've made your money, then you can be nice.
Yeah.
But if you haven't.
It's enlightened capitalism. And it's what every ruler who wants to actually have a empire needs to learn is like, you take care of your people.
Yeah, or they'll fucking kill you, or they'll kill you.
Otherwise, they'll revolt. Yeah, and not only that, but everyone's going to make fun of your country because you treated it like a shithole that you're just there to exploit.
Well, this is like Doug Rushkoff read that article, and we talked about it on this podcast where he went, and you probably saw this, where he like these ultra billionaires like invited him to come talk to them in their compounds.
Oh yeah,
their survivalist compounds, and they were talking about like the event and how like everyone was going to rise up against them. And Doug said to them, it's like, and they wanted his opinion on like how to survive and technology and blockchain and all this. And he just said
$30 an hour minimum wage, universal health care.
Basically what he said to them is, have you considered being nice to people? And they just looked at him like, what? What are you talking about? What?
No.
Meanwhile, they're talking about like private security forces and all this,
No, it's people. I think it comes to the gameplay. And like my whole life has been very cool. I play very cooperatively. That's my strategy. I'm all about network, make friends, expend energy I don't need return. I'm just going to help you because what the fuck am I doing? Nothing. Just do that. Build your relationships that way. And that gives you a certain security because it's like, and it's like, I never felt like it was like, it's not transactional. because it's so dispersed. It's just like, I'm going to try and be good. And I will count on the fact that, I've got friends and I'll help them and they'll help me.
Yeah.
And we will mutual support.
Yeah. When I was when the economic crash happened and I was putting together Dangerous Minds with Richard, there was a guy that he really liked named Charles Hughes Smith, who was an economist who wrote this really good article that was right after the economic collapse, where he basically said, all you people trying to bug out into the woods and be survivalists and build compounds underground with all your food, Mormon style. Okay, great. What happens when you break your leg or you twist your foot and there's no one around? He said, this is just a stupid idea. It's a bad survival strategy. The correct strategy is making lots of friends and having a huge network and being of use to them. He was like, can you sharpen knives? Be the knife sharpening guy in your community. That type of, find what you can do and contribute. I think that's correct. Yeah.
If each, and not only that, but I mean, internally, it's each skill you learn, you go, hey, I got a skill. That's a thing you own in a way that it's not a tool. Yeah. It's not a handbag to show off. It's a thing that you possess. It's really, it's in your mind. It's a construction that you've done. And because you've done it now, you own it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this whole American survivalist thing is just totally insane. And I'm not one to normally do this, but you have to say things as they are. It has some severely racist undertones to it. People are just we got to get out of the inner cities. We got to get out in the woods. They're coming for us. It's okay. Have you tried talking to anyone in the inner city?
Analysis. The countryside is not a safe place.
Not at all.
There's a lot of crime in fairly low density places, which seems wrong, but this is, again, one of the flips that people don't realize. Yeah, the 70s kind of sucked in cities. That's because there was a whole transition going on. Anybody who's actually lived in cities like London or Paris.
Fuck it, I wouldn't live in London.
Montreal, lots of cities, New York.
I wouldn't live in New York now either, though.
Well,
that's a different issue, though, but that's because
COVID is really pulled. Because the COVID reversed this trend, because the whole safety of a city is there's 20 people witnessing anything that goes on.
But okay, Kitty Genovese, right? It doesn't necessarily matter if you're in New York. I've been attacked in New York and people just stood there watching with their mouths open. So,
Well, yeah, I don't know. I've never had that here. The only time I know.
Well, Canada probably not, I think, but New York is a little different. New Yorkers just don't care.
I don't know. Yeah. Maybe it's just me and my friends, but I actually know that we're kind of interventionists.
Oh, well, if it's your friends, that's a different story. I mean, Kitty Genovese was her neighbors. I mean,
with strangers.
Strangers and neighbors, yeah.
It's no, stop what you're doing. What you're doing is wrong. I can't remember. I can't remember. I mean, I got kicked out of the house for saying that, but, you see a mother hitting their child. It's I'm sorry. It's I don't care how upset you are with your child. What you're doing is wrong. And that's just call it moral absolutism if you want to. But I don't think shooting random people in the head is really the kind of thing we should say, well, yeah, but I mean, they felt they needed to do that. It was their personal self-expression.
They had a hard
It's no, it's, you got to draw some reasonable lines.
Absolutely. Oh, so I asked it about data compared to the rest of the world. It basically, go figure. It seems like data isn't clearly kept about these things. Would you just go figure? It's people don't want people knowing these figures.
No, they don't.
It basically said that it doesn't know compared to the rest of the world, but it said that the U.S. has relatively high rates of homelessness ranging among the OECD countries. Oh, what is OECD? That's
basically developed countries.
Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So it's NATO or something. I don't know. Who knows? But it says it has high rates of homelessness, particularly when compared to Southern European countries. That's interesting. It says Southern, not Northern.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, Northern European countries might have statistically almost zero homelessness. I don't know.
They may just not be keeping records either. So for instance, during COVID, it looked like Africa had zero, the whole continent of Africa had zero COVID outside of
Right.
I think South Africa or something, but or not all most of the country, it was just grayed out, like it didn't have any code. It's like that's because they're not taking records or reporting records, and China was taking records but not sharing them with everyone else. So, but yeah, this is here we go. Okay, the AI pulled this from Our World and Data, and they have some interactive charts. Oh, here we go. Okay, I'm gonna text this to you on the chat. How do I do that? Okay, so for people that are listening, what I am looking at, you can easily find on the internet. It is a bunch of charts about homelessness, interactive charts, and it is at ourworldindata.org/homelessness. I'll put that in the show notes also. Here's the chat. Okay, so I'm going to I text you the link on chat, and then it looks like it's actually been going down from 2007. Okay, however, like here's the thing though, like the figures that they have on homelessness, it's decreased quite a bit from 2007 to 2016, but the figures they have for that are, I'm sorry, excuse me, both sheltered and unsheltered homeless have gone down. But this was up to 2016. I would guess it's skyrocketed since 2020. So like, for instance, like violence in the US, despite what the media says, like the violent crime in the US was plummeted from, it was at its height in the 70s. Like New York Joker style, like Taxi Driver. It was unbelievable. And then it plummeted without interruption all the way up to the point where violent crime was almost non-existent in the US, despite what we hear in the news all the time. Because the shootings, I feel like Canadians and Europeans think that like America is like this gigantic Call of Duty game where people are just all shooting each other as soon as they walk out the door. But basically violence was non-existent until the COVID lockdowns, in which case it went through the roof. And now it's more than the 70s.
Really?
Yeah, it's more. I don't know about now, but it certainly was 2020, 21. And now I suspect it's probably still pretty high because people are really hurting after that, economically and otherwise. Mentally, they're hurting. So
it was a complex. I mean, all of the stuff that's like, however you feel about the mRNA vaccines and whatever the math. However you feel, all that we definitely know is a lot of people felt a lot of anxiety and trauma over that period.
Yeah.
For whatever reasons, it's like, as with most things, it's like, it's not even worth analyzing. It's like, should they have or shouldn't they have? Was it just or caused or anything? That's irrelevant. Because what the people felt is what they felt. And the recovery needs to be from where they are, not from where you wish they were.
Yeah. So what do you think? I feel like people right now are basically just kind of pretending like it never happened. And I don't know, what's it like in Toronto?
Toronto's very mixed. Most people are pretty lax again. Now that it's wintertime, it's starting to pick up wearing them on the TTC and stuff.
Oh,
but we don't have a mandate, so we're not bothering for the most part.
Okay.
But I think the one thing is, and the one thing that it's like, always been my feeling about it, but it just never made sense. But it's like, you're someplace, let's say I go to church. I have huge faith in my white blood cells and my physical being.
Okay.
I have immense faith in this little vehicle I'm driving. And so I don't bother. I'm like, no, my white blood cells can handle it. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger.
So you're still, I may be like, on a totally, because basically like I didn't come out of lockdown. Like I don't go out into big public places or anything like that. Part of that is just my personality because I was like that before COVID. But
yeah, I'm just living my life exactly the same as I before COVID.
Okay. And so you do feel that things are kind of back to normal.
Yeah, very much here. That feels very like the streets were like, oh my God, like Christmas shopping is going to be busy on the streets of Toronto. People like their shopping here. It's really like people love their shopping.
Yeah,
it's really, it's a very commercial and like everybody loves to be dressed. Like people are really into being on top of shit here and fixing up their houses too. It's kind of like the bouginess is like a little much for me because I've been living so minimal for a while.
Why are people like that? They're competing with New York or just different self-image?
I think it's something that Canada's always promoted. Oh, actually, if you ever come up to Toronto, you totally have to come to this place, Casa Loma.
What is it?
And you should look it up and investigate it a bit.
Castle Loma?
Casa Loma.
Okay,
it's
Casa.
a castle in Toronto.
Castle
Like
Loma.
a castle.
Okay.
And it was
That's
built
a pretty
by
big castle.
like this crazy rich guy who made all his money. He bought a bunch of land out in Western Canada before there was even a railway out there.
Okay.
And then
damn, this castle's huge. This is like a Disneyland castle.
It's a Disneyland castle. There's back passages. You start to investigate this guy, and it's like, oh, he was no doubt involved in weird Toronto stuff. His house is located, because I'm very much about the Masonic stuff in Toronto. His house is located right on Davenport, which is the old Indian Trail. It's also the piece of land that has some other historical significance, and the Masonic Temple in Toronto, which is right at the corner of this same street, the oldest Indian, like the oldest trail that existed that the Iroquois and whoever used, and the longest street in the world, Yonge Street, right at the corner is the Masonic Temple. Right now, the home of InfoMart, or whoever is basically picking the brains of Toronto all the time.
InfoMart? Like, what is that?
Infotech. It's like whoever's in the Masonic Temple, they have big posters that say, yes, we're taking all your data and we know how your brain
works. Well, let me shed some light on that, because as a 32nd degree Freemason.
Wait, there's one more thing.
Okay, go ahead.
The angle between the Masonic Temple and this guy's house, pick a number.
Over 9,000.
No, 33.
Nice. Well, 33 is an important number in Freemasonry, so very likely. So Freemasonry is dying. I mean, like the thing with Freemasonry is everyone, Greatest Generation all joined when they came back from the war because they needed that unit experience. They still needed to be part of a regimented group with people. No boomers joined, and then no Gen Xers joined, like 0. And then a ton of millennials joined, because millennials have this kind of like service mentality, a lot do, which Freemasonry is very big on, like the Shriner hospitals and things like that. But the organization is running out of money. Like the lodge I was part of had to be sold. And so I would suspect that what's happening there is they're simply renting it out to another business that's paying the fees, because they do that all the time. Yeah, because a lot of those Masonic buildings were just bought in cash, like in the 30s or something like that, and they just own the building, so they can do stuff like that.
Oh yeah, no, it's usually the concert hall, just like it is in New York. I mean, that's where we saw Throbbing Gristle, right?
I saw Throbbing Gristle in London and LA.
No, they played the Masonic. It's in by Pradish area.
I think there's a Masonic temple they do shows in San Francisco, I think. Or excuse me, no, there's just Masonic Street.
Maybe, I don't know. I didn't see many shows. I did see just recently Tangerine Dream.
How was that?
With none of the original members.
Okay.
And it was still really great.
It was awesome.
Really cool. Yeah. They impressed me, actually. My brother had a really great time. He loved it. My friend, whose birthday it was, and I sort of took out, he complained because it was too loud.
Okay.
But I enjoyed it. But what I was impressed with was right at the start when we were there, the guy's like, he's like whoever the leadish guy of the present unit is. He was sort of like chit-chatting a little bit at the start, and he was like, oh yeah. And so earlier when we were playing, we wrung out the room, like we found the resonant frequency of the building. And so then he was like, here it is. And he's like, and it's just like, hold the place, that feeling you get when you're at that resonant. It's just like, it's like the whole place is just like full. It's like the air somehow is like full of cotton.
Wait, what was he? He was playing a frequency that was the frequency of the building?
Yeah, it's like he had just gone with his oscillator, and slowly, you can do this in any room you want. Just slowly pan up through all the frequencies, and you'll hear at a certain frequency, you'll just be like, whoa.
Really?
You can that's the note. And so they found it. It was this super deep note, and he saved it for the jam on the second.
Was it like
every once in a while he'd push it and it would just be like,
was it like super like low on the low end, like 10, 20 hertz or something like that?
No, it's higher than that. My guess would have been it was like 50, 5.
Interesting. Yeah, that checks out. Did you know that 40 hertz is the frequency range of Tibetan chanting and will actually induce unity consciousness if you just listen to an oscillator at 40 hertz? I've tested it. It's interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Just put on an oscillator at 40 hertz and just sit there.
I wonder what our dream machines were like. I used to plan to make sure that they were pinging me at around 8
hertz.
Yeah. I would design I'd ratio the holes to the tube to the speed of the turntable. So they would do around 8 hertz because that's the alpha waves.
Did you just do the 78 RPM player and cardboard cutout dream machine?
Well, I just did it on 33. It doesn't matter what turntable is.
I thought it had to be 78.
You just have to recalculate the number of holes if you're running at a slower speed.
Okay.
It's just a proportion to make sure that you get hit with the lights at about, usually you want it between 8 and 10, 12, depends. The ones that I built always had 3 different frequencies built into 3 different, but the traditional one is one single frequency.
So for those who are listening who don't know about this, the Dream Machine is a device invented by Brian Geisen that Burroughs and then later Topi were super big on, which is like a cylinder with holes in it with a light inside that spins on a record player, and you look at it with closed eyes and it creates a flicker pattern on your eyelids that makes you trip. When I first met Jen gave me the original pamphlet from Topi in the 80s on how to make one, and I did it with a 33, and it was interesting, but I just used the 78 one, so I don't think it was right. And so I've never properly done Dream Machine, like never.
Oh, yeah, no, it's important that you tune it. Like even if you can get a record player that's got a good pitch control on it.
Can you just buy them? Like I was looking, they must make nice ones now, right? Can you just buy one?
Somebody must buy them, but okay. I mean,
if somebody was going to make a Dream Machine, they'd probably be listening to this podcast. Please, somebody make them and sell them. Thank you.
Yeah. Jason can do an unboxing even.
Oh, actually, if you make, I'll say this to my listeners. If you actually make and sell a Dream Machine, you can come on this podcast and talk about it.
There we go. Free advertising.
If you're not like psycho or unpleasant or anything like that. If you're normal. And by normal, I don't mean your interests. I mean, like, are you polite?
Yeah, you got to be nice.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And then you can market your $200, $300 Dream Machine to like thousands of people who will probably want to buy it. I will buy a Dream. If you make a Dream Machine, I will buy one. I won't.
I mean, I was so crazy back in the day. I used to just take my synthesizer output, the headphone output. I only did this a few times, but you can do it. You take the headphone output, best with battery operated devices so you don't electrocute yourself. But you take the headphone output, and then I would soak the wires in salt. I'd attach the wires to little pads that I had soaked in salt water, and then I put them on my eyes.
That must be great for you.
And you can make the phosphenes come right off the back of your retina.
What do you
using
mean?
The electricity.
What are you talking? What?
The electrical headphone signal will force the chemicals in your eye to light up.
So it just gets brighter?
Well, no, it's like flash, flash, flash.
Oh, wow.
It was so it was like.
So you're basically shooting sparks into your brain through your eyeballs and your retina?
Well, I'm coaxing.
That's like one step. That's like one step away from ECT. So
it's one step away from ECT.
Have you ever tried TDCS, transdermal cranial stimulation? It's basically exactly what you're talking about, except you put you put the pads on your head.
Play around with that all the time, actually. And my friend
to stimulate areas of your brain.
Yeah, I mean, things were still freewheeling in the 70s and 80s like that.
You can get them on Amazon now for like $150, something like that. I've used a lot of TDCS. It's probably responsible for some of my more flagrantly insane social media posts. But it definitely works. I mean, you just put like a negative pole on your shoulder and then the positive pole somewhere on your head. And depending on the region you put it in, it stimulates different areas of the brain to do things like, this was developed by DARPA. So it's like you can do things like lower depression, increase unity consciousness, increase mathematical ability, increase focus, like increase empathy, things like this, depending on where you put it. Yeah, and it works. TDCS, I recommend it. It's very interesting.
Because that sounds like very much like the little electrostimulation device that Pete Townsend used to kick heroin back in the day.
Did it work long term?
There were a bunch of people, and there was this device that was marketed back in the day, and it was like these two little electrical stimulators that you put at the base of your spine, as I recall. And then it had this little oscillator, and specific frequencies would induce your brain to release specific chemicals.
Oh, instead of taking a hit?
Exactly.
You would do that? Did it work for him?
So, like, satisfy your morphine need without needing it, and then you can just like slowly turn down the volume on it.
That sounds useful to have if you're not an addict or kicking drugs, just to have it. Do they have to surgically implant it, or is it like just you stick it to your neck?
No. It's just like those little stickers on the back of your neck.
Do they still sell this? What is this called?
I don't know.
Okay.
If you look at Pete Townsend, electrostimulation addiction or something.
Did it work for him long term?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it did. And there was a bunch of people. But I mean, this whole realm, it's weird. It's one of these times, it's like with the UFOs, it's like it's opening up the woo. And I'm going to presently err on the side of curmudgeon materialist.
I agree with you.
Because I'm just going to be like, listen, if the woo is right, it'll meet any challenge I put it. And if it's not, then it's not, like sort of thing. And it's like, everyone knows me. It's like, I don't know. It's like anybody who knows me knows that it's like, I can say I don't believe in anything, and at the same time, I'm a materialist, and at the same time, I believe in touch therapy because I've done it to people.
Well, I think there's lots of research on that about the positive effects of touch on
all
people.
Kinds of things. So I mean, it's like it's one of these moments where it's just really hard because it's opening up a lot of these things, like this kind of TENS thing. It's like, wait, this concept of basically oscillating fields and various frequencies having various effects on various parts of the body and et cetera, this whole thing, it can be taken into a totally like too woo-ish place.
Absolutely, yeah. I've been thinking this is interesting.
But at the same time, there's something very solid there.
Yeah, I think it's just a question of not over-exaggerating. And that's what I strive to do with magic. Like, it would be so easy for me to like be like, I am the prophet of the new aeon, and you must like follow my system and do what I say. Like, just like go full Eric Cartman mode, but which might be funny. But like, no, I try to not overpromise because if there actually are supernatural things in magic, people will find them on their own, and I don't need to tell them. I just need to tell them the basics that are real, that will not violate people's idea of what is sane. But I think that now, looking back on the 90s, which is something that I do a lot of, too much of, do you remember that role-playing game, Vampire the Masquerade?
I never played any games.
Okay. So this is a really popular role-playing game in the 90s where you were like, played a counterculture vampire. And I had the guy who created the show on the podcast, or created the game on the podcast, Mark Reinhagen, and we were talking about that. And he was saying, like, look, in the 90s, the bad guy was the moral majority. Like, we were trying to fight the, Christian censorship and the, concerned parents for like explicit lyrics labels and Tipper Gore and all of that stuff. And so that's why things were so edgy. And like the thing in the 90s was like, or the 80s was like apocalypse culture, like challenging reality. Well, now, like, we need reality put back together. It's like I tell people, it's like, I don't, like, when people ask me about magic, first of all, I don't even put it in the same discourse as science. It's just like if somebody asks me like, well, what about science? I'm like, well, I surrender. It's just like, I don't like argue with science. Magic is like an art form or a personal growth process. It's something subjective. I am not making any type of truth claims with it. I'm just saying this is a fun and personally evolutionary and very, very maturing thing to do if you do it right. But I'm not claiming the universe works by magic. And, I've been telling people recently, it's like, you only need like one or two guys like me. You only need a few people holding up the magic flag. Like, society is, the internet has revealed, it's like, I remember in the 90s, I assumed that like everyone was like totally rational, and it's like they just have this like control lockdown on everything. And what the internet has shown is like everyone is utterly irrational. So if anything, we need more rationality and more science and more logic, and that needs to be separate and held up, and more data, and that needs to be respected and held up instead of all, just saying it's fake news or whatever, or global warming isn't real. That's the issue right now, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's absurd. It's like and you can't argue. What was Kevin Newth, this scientist who's been looking at the UFOs in a very let's look at the evidence.
So what do you think of, so by the way, I have not followed this at all, the UFO thing, because I'm just like, is the government saying it? I'm not interested. But what's your take on it?
It's so weird. It's so weird and complicated. But he's just a very nuts and bolts scientist. And it's like, look at, if you can travel faster than light, then in a way time starts to not mean anything, because time dilation will affect you while you're traveling. So you could visit Earth and then visit another planet, come back to Earth, and it's 10 years later on Earth, or it's 1,000 years later on Earth. To you, it was a week, but that way you can watch humans evolve, because you just come and visit every week. Only on Earth, it's 10,000 years have gone by every week, sort of thing. It's like there's ways of getting around these. So once you start playing, it only takes 3 or 4 species in a galaxy, I guess. Like once you get to a certain level of technology, if you can start to do this crazy traveling almost the speed of light, or so close that it's equivalent, then everything will just seem like child's play, relatively speaking. It's like they can do time dilation. You think it's time dilation. Maybe they just shot a light at you and they knocked you out for half an hour, and posed you in a bunch of positions, and like they got memes coming out.
Teabagged you and took pictures.
You're famous on their planet.
You're famous on alien internet. I wouldn't. That's probably what it is. It's like, well, they're just coming here. They're just coming here to pose with us for selfies, is what you're saying.
I mean, I don't know. The only thing that seems to make sense to me is that at this point, it's like I very much see. I guess it's like the alien kind of scenario, Prometheus thing. It's like, okay, so maybe they came to a planet. These people that already know they've evolved and they got traveling around and stuff, So they see a cool planet like Earth. Maybe there was life, maybe there wasn't life. Maybe there already was some life, maybe there wasn't. Maybe this is where the octopus come from. And all it takes is one of them to throw their lunch in the cesspool.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Like one of them dies.
It's like a Frito-Lay wrapper with like their skin cells on it.
Because inside of us, in the DNA, if you had primordial Earth at a certain point and you just threw in one dead human, because we're an entire biome, so I've got like this, like who knows how many species I incorporate in my body. I've probably got like 1,000 different species inside of me and on me and stuff. So all of that DNA would fall apart, and fragments that worked would work, and ones that didn't, but it would sort of give this, it would have been that nudge that just coaxes things along a little bit. And so I can totally see that of happening, who knows at what stage they did it, whether it was during maybe Burgess Shale period, maybe it was before there was any life, who knows exactly. And then they just keep on visiting because they're just like, well, how does this petri dish turn out?
So basically,
and how does the other one?
You've just described like the first 3 pages of Genesis.
Yeah, but that's the I've been so into the Enki and Enlil.
Oh, really? Lately. The Sumerian stuff.
Yeah, because they evolve into Yahweh sort of like might be one of them. I think it's Enlil who's the ass. One of them is a really controlling guy, basically, it seems like. And one of them is a little bit more freewheeling and it's like wants humans. One of them wants to control humans like we're slaves. One of them is like, no, let them play. It's like they'll be, they've got their thing to do. Let's watch them play there.
Sumeria is ultra interesting for me. And I noticed also Damien Eccles went on a huge Sumeria trip a while ago. But the reason it's so fascinating for me is it's, as far as we know, the first civilization that we have records of it. Now, I'm not up on all the ancient aliens and Göbekli Tepe and all of that stuff, but Sumeria is pretty freaking old. It's I believe, the oldest established civilization that we know of. Nobody knew it existed until they just dug it up randomly in the late 19th century. There were vague references in the Bible, but nobody knew it was even a thing until they dug it up. I mean, that might happen again with satellite imaging or something. We don't know, with other civilizations. But the other thing is the culture. I believe they were conquered by the Akkadians, who were conquered by the Babylonians. So a lot of the ideas of the Sumerians, including potentially Kabbalah, went from Sumeria to Akkadia to Babylon to the Jews in the Babylonian captivity. So there's a potentially an argument to be made there that some of the stuff that ended up in Kabbalah it does go back to Sumeria. Now, I'm not a historian, so I might be talking out of my ass, but what I just described that is the history of it. If anything survived, that's currently above my pay grade. But the Sumerian conception of the world. Oh, the other reason why I'm so interested in it is because Crowley said at one point later on, the magical tradition goes back to Sumeria, and the point of his work is to reconstruct the Sumerian tradition. And he said that Aiwass was a Sumerian god at one point. Or I think he may have said that Aiwass was Enki or Enlil at one point. He may have. I don't know. He said something like that. But the Sumerian worldview, I think there's only like one or two books on it. The Sumerian worldview, from what we've been able to piece together, was essentially that human beings existed only to serve the gods. They were slaves to the gods and had no worth otherwise. Like, there was no idea about human rights or human dignity or the inherent value of humans, but it was just that humans were to serve the gods. And also, I believe the idea of Babylon also goes back to Sumeria, like the Scarlet Woman temple goddess, and which means that Babylon is a lot older than Christianity. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Like, by a lot. And so all of that is just super interesting to me. Also, I love the Sumerian conception.
Yeah, you said Christianity when you mean Judaism.
Well, also that, yeah. But
I mean, there was no Christianity until 1 AD or 0 AD,
right.
or whatever.
Or when Paul put it together. I mean, Jesus. And then
300
Paul,
after or whatever. Yeah. Definitely it's in the ADs.
I believe that Babylon is in Judaism as well. Like, there's something about the red-haired kind of temple prostitute figure, I believe comes from that time period in part of the world. And so that tradition didn't stop.
A really great YouTube is the Esoterica. I don't know if you watched it.
Is that Sledge's, what's his name? James Justin Sledge?
Maybe.
Yeah. I think, and if that's who I think it is, if that's what you're talking about.
But he's like very well researched.
He's like a rabbi.
History. Yeah.
No,
that
guy, by the way, I have not watched his YouTube, but I studied a lot of his papers while writing the D book. That guy I vouch for. He knows his shit. I haven't watched his YouTube, but I respect that guy's opinion. He goes
back to the original texts and stuff. It's nice to see that kind of putting that kind of thing, because it really gives perspective to some of these traditions. But this idea sort of is just like, so it's like, so the aliens came and they made some humans, and apparently it seems like Enlil was like straight ahead, like, we made a bunch of robot humans. They're supposed to dig our gold for us or whatever it is that we need, or plutonium, whatever, but Enlil was sort of like, I don't know, these ones seem like somehow like a little more charming than some of the others or something. It's like some spark of the idea, and whether that's just human delusion or whether he had his own, he just wanted to take them away from Enlil or something, who knows. But it's sort of like this battling sort of ideas of sort of should we be under, to me it's more like, should we be under control, like monotheism and stuff, or do we just let, go play and let's see how it turns out? Let's not get a lot of preconceived ideas about how things should be, how we should behave. If we each just behave in a civil, decent manner to each other, we don't need a dogma. It's like, and I had this long discussion when I was in Costa Rica, trying to explain how an atheist can possibly be a decent, moral human being.
Really easily. You don't follow all those insane.
As a decent human being.
You don't do all the insane shit that religions tell you to do.
Yeah, exactly. And they told me, and it's like, but you're an atheist. Why are you nice?
Because I'm an atheist, thank God.
And then it's like, so I basically had to explain game theory to them in a way.
Wait, okay. Break that down. How does game theory relate to atheism? That's interesting.
Well, cooperative. I build relationships. This is my game strategy. You can be a hoarder as a game strategy. You can be, big into alliances. I'm big into alliances. It's like, why would I? It's like, if you play Golden Rule, then yeah, you might get screwed once in a while. But the relationships you build will be enough compensation. And it's a way of weeding people out too. Because I mean, once you see somebody who doesn't play that way, you don't play with them anymore.
Right.
But you still get to play with all the people that you've tested, because you have to, like, it's sort of, what's this analogy? The fetish community.
Okay.
It used to be, you want to go to a fetish party, you need to dress nice. You cannot come into a fetish party in your homeboy jeans and your t-shirt. That's not cool. And why? It's because everyone who's coming to this party is making themselves vulnerable by coming to this party. So that's an anti, And so the dressing up is like, this is the proof that I'm invested in the risk that I'm taking by making myself vulnerable.
I see.
For the benefit, it will pay off later. Same in game theory. It's like, you have to risk somebody burning you.
You're putting some skin in the game. No pun intended.
You have to put some skin in the game to find out whether there's a bond there.
Okay.
Because otherwise, if you play too shady with people all the time, nobody will ever trust you. If you dive in wholeheartedly with people, they know they've got a good ally when they need a good ally. So therefore, they're going to be more likely to support you at a time when you need, because they understand that you've already played as a fair player, and that you will compensate again at some point.
I really like that. That's very helpful. I think putting it in the way that you've said and saying, like, yeah, you're going to get burned a few times, but making it a percent and a small percent, which it probably will be, suddenly doesn't make it a black and white thing. Because always it's like, oh, like I should trust people, but I got burned that one time, so I can't trust anyone. That's 100%. So I think turning it into like a numbers game is actually very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's like the danger of trauma. Because trauma, like of all kinds, it's like even all kinds of things. It's like it makes you fearful.
Yeah. Well,
that's what it's
supposed to do.
You're anticipating a worst case scenario.
It's trying to protect you.
Which makes you act. But that almost
then you overact. Yeah.
It's confining.
Yeah.
It's confining you. It's not allowing you to make plays that might be in your best interest because you're not prepared to take the risk. It's like love, I mean, you have to risk.
It's gigantic risk.
You have to risk. You have to reach your hand out for somebody else to grab it. If you just stand there like this with your arms crossed, nobody can ever grab your hand. You can stick your hand out and somebody might leave you hanging. And you go, okay, well, whatever. But, you have to take the chance. Otherwise, you can't get the upside. It's like you've got to put the ante in to play the game.
I like that. So I don't want to totally leave Sumeria though. So you found out more stuff about
Sumeria. So I just it's like, and this is how there's this channel I've been watching lately, Two Old Guys.
Okay.
I think that's what it's called. Two Old Guys, and they have like a peace sign as their symbol thing. It's like, I don't know. I don't know what things. Right now, it's like in my mind, they're like two gay, Grateful Dead hippies who are like imparting their knowledge.
That sounds great.
Knowledge
that sounds awesome.
On all this stuff. And they're like, I mean, mostly it's like, the Mr. Tetragrammaton. I shit in 4 letters face. Okay. This person, this creature, this disembodied thing has caused a lot of problems on this planet as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. It's like the subgeniuses said, like Jehovah won, Jehovah was an alien and he's still at large.
Exactly.
He has not yet been brought to justice.
No, exactly. That's exactly the stance. But they go into it a bit about this genealogy thing about the Englian and the Enlil thing, and how Yahweh and El got sort of merged together to become this,
okay, yeah.
And how Enlil was probably more like Al.
So the suffix for angels is always al. I believe is that also Sumerian? El or al is the suffix for all angels.
Which to me just reminds me of sort of like the way I used to play when I was doing drugs a lot, and with the PTV, it's like the jack of the, like they did the album Jack of the Tab, which to me was the intelligence in the tab. It's like the spirit in the tab. You say the jack of the pulpit, it's a kind of plant because it has a penis, but I mean, the idea is that there's sort of like an intelligence, there's a being there, the jack of the. So the al is sort of like, it's a spirit, it has an intelligence, it's not just a thing, it's got some level of spirit to it.
I think in Kabbalah, even the al actually animates the being when it's added. I could be making that up though.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Like the Al-Kabar or whatever it is thing in Egyptian, where you have the different layers of soul. This is like an animation.
Yeah. I think just writing the name, because the Kabbalah is all about writing. I mean, just adding the letters to the name by God, not by people, is what created them. Because the concept is that God created the universe with the Hebrew alphabet. So.
Oh, yeah, right.
Anyways, I love the Sumerian conception of the afterlife. It's the most hilarious afterlife ever, other than the Mormons, which is actually just ridiculous. But in the Sumerians' conception of the afterlife is basically it's just this like endless foggy gray void. And it's just kind of there. And it's just like you're walking through fog forever. And there's beer, but it sucks. So basically when the Sumerians talked about the afterlife, what we've gathered is instead of saying heaven or hell, they basically referred to it as the place where the beer sucks. Scary stuff.
So they weren't selling it
in the afterlife.
Yeah, they weren't selling them.
That was unclear as to whether you had to buy the shitty beer or not.
No, but I'm just like, no, I mean, it's like you sell heaven as being paradise when you want somebody to kill themselves. Because
suicides all go to hell, the suicide forest in Dante's Inferno. You turn into a wailing tree.
Unless you're using that death as being a martyr.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, if you're doing it as, you get 72 virgins in paradise and all that. Like, yeah.
And even Christians, if you live a good Christian life, you get to go to heaven with this angel-y whatever, I don't know, this fanciful, like, nice place where all the good Christians go and everyone is enjoying having Jell-O mold dinners and whatever.
I would really like to go back. I don't actually mean this, but I would like to go back to pre-Protestant times. Like just imagine that like Martin Luther had not done any reforms. That would be great. Like now, if you want to go to heaven, you literally just like the church can just like garnish your paycheck or something like that. And then they guarantee you get into heaven. It's like, or they should just put a price tag. It's like entry to heaven, $45,000. You don't have to pay it all at once. You can pay it over your lifetime, or you can leave your estate to us. It's like, great.
That's the way it used to be.
That's how it used to be. It's like you send, okay, give me $10. It's like $10. $10. It's like literally like indulgences are like the equivalent of the swear jar. It's like,
yeah.
Oh, you murdered somebody? That's going to be $15. Pay up.
Yeah. That's definitely worse sin.
I also just love the idea of like the first civilization in history being comprised of beer snobs. It's like, this is not a microbrew.
But I just like, why would you make a heaven that's so mediocre?
Well, it wasn't supposed to be heaven. I don't think anyone
like, how does that manipulate? I just don't understand. It's like, what is to me, it's like the only purpose of having the concept of an afterlife is of any specificity is to manipulate people with this image.
But they were all slaves, so they didn't have to manipulate them. And it was basically,
I know, but it's like but they could have. Why would they feed them such a it's like,
yeah.
Oh yeah, you're going to have a miserable life as a slave. And then when you die, then you go to a really boring place where the beer's not even this good.
This is really funny. This is like control alpha release. It's like, we haven't even got to beta yet. It's like, how do we get them to do what we want? Tell them the gods hate them and that they get shitty beer in the afterlife. Let's see how this goes. Okay, alpha.
Like,
let's go back to the drawing board. This is
not working.
Okay, so it's like, maybe if we tell them that God will punish them if they don't do what we want. Okay, kind of works. What if we use positive reinforcement instead of negative reinforcement? If you do what we say, you go to heaven.
Let's not get rid of the negative reinforcement.
Okay. Yes, let's keep all our tools.
Keep all our tools. That seemed to work pretty well.
Have you read Western Lands, the Burroughs book?
I read it back in the day when it came out, but nice. I didn't connect with it as much as Place of Dead Roads.
I love my favorite Burroughs books are the last three: Place of Dead Roads and Cities of the Red Knight and the Western Lands. However, one of the reasons I like them is that they're most legible. Dennis Cooper basically said that all those were ghost written. Now, I don't know if Dennis Cooper might have just been being catty because he wrote a lot of anti-Burroughs essays, or at least he wrote one significant one after he died. So I don't know if that's true or not, but it's kind of a totally different writing style than his cut-up books. So clearly he had James Grauerholz or whoever, he had a good editor at the very least. But for me, those three, the Burroughs ones to read are those three and then The Job and The Third Mind, because those are the ones with the most interesting ideas in them. But the reason I bring up Western Lands is he got super into Egypt because he read Norman Mailer's book, Ancient Evenings, which is about Egypt. And then he got obsessed with Egypt as a proto-control system with promises of afterlife. And he talked about all these rich...
You wrote that book that was sort of that touched on that.
Which one?
I can't remember what it was called. It was this long adventure.
That I still have not been able to publish that. God damn it. Hopefully I will soon.
It's all about that secret guy. I can't remember, but he lives in he lives in Egypt, basically.
Yeah, this is a secret book that the public does not know about. But it will come out at some point for sure. Yeah, I think you're one of 3 people to ever read that. And I worked on it for years, 7 years or something.
Because it was sort of like the Egyptian thing, only taken as sort of an allegory for philosophical self-development and spiritual enlightenment sort of motif thing.
Yeah, I got to get that book out. Well, now you've said it on the air, so now people know there's another book. So by the way, let me see how many I can get out of this. I have publishers interested in this book currently. However, if you are a publisher and you also are interested in publishing fiction, please get in touch with me because I have a very good book. Okay. But actually now...
that was very intense along those same lines. It was... Yeah.
Part of that was inspired by Western Lands, so yeah.
Right. The whole idea of the control and this edifice of social structure to maintain these orders and things, which we live in now. We live in some kind of weird, devolved. I live in Canada. I'm at the top of the freaking hill up here,
Yeah.
I do nothing and I have decent food, even though it's expensive as fuck. But
yeah, no kidding.
Prices have really gone up. But still, it's I know what really living is. Living out of a bag of black beans and a bag of rice, and this is how if I find plantains, then that's a nice bonus.
Nice.
Sort of thing, I know that life. So it's I'm standing around here and it's I am so we are so removed up here from it's just it's scarily nice up here.
Well, Texas is pretty removed, which is why so many people moved here. It is for now. We'll see how long that lasts. But it's not totally removed. Dallas and Houston are gigantic. Do you know that Texas, the 3 cities in Texas are going to be the 3 biggest cities in the U.S. by 2100? Or rather, not 3. It's going to be probably Austin, San Antonio at that point, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston are going to be the 3 big. They're going to be bigger than New York and L.A. Yep.
Wow.
It's a big state. Texas is the size of Europe. It's when people dog me for living in Texas, I'm like, well, it's the size of Europe. There's a lot of stuff here.
Yeah. No, the scale of people, it's funny, Europe, it's so cute because, literally it's you go from one neighborhood to another. It's the same distance from New York to Boston or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're in a different country.
Yeah, I really envy that actually, because I know a lot of people in Europe or England can just get on a Ryanair, equivalent of Spirit Airlines, and just fly all all of Europe, and they can just like hop over to like Luxembourg or like Benidorm,
my
Spain
God,
for the
my sister
weekend.
is like, yeah, I know constantly. My sister is like, oh yeah, we were in the Swiss Alps hiking this weekend.
as you do, yeah.
But it's so easy there because I mean the distance is like just like it's a whole level of scale. It's like just it's literally like a large level of magnitude. So like every scale is like 10 times bigger here in North America. I mean, like look at you from one end of the country to the other is 3,000 miles. What country is even 300 miles?
Yeah.
In Europe?
Yeah, that's not like one of the things that blew my mind because I didn't learn this
or
until
1,000 miles, whatever. But I mean, it's like it's just huge.
One of the things that consistently blows my mind every time I remember it is that the map is wrong. Like they made the sizes of the countries all different in the Mercator projection map.
Oh yeah, the Mercator projection is so goofy.
It's so good, and it's like Africa is freaking gigantic. It's like bigger than every other continent, but they made it small. I mean, Freud do a Freudian analysis on that. Not hard. But it's just like, come on, at least like this is the thing. People are like, well, you got to trust the authorities. Like they didn't even give us the right map of the world. Are you kidding?
They don't want you. Yeah, they don't want. They don't want you to know that America's decent sized.
Yeah,
and Africa is monstrous.
It's huge. It's gigantic. I wonder how big it is compared to Europe and America. Like how many Americas could you fit all of North America and Africa?
You can fit all of America. You can fit the United States, all of Europe, maybe North America and South America.
That's great. And yet people are taught to basically just ignore it and pretend it's not there. Man, that's insanity.
Yeah. If Africa, I mean, well, I don't know. If Africa could get it together, if the colonial powers hadn't constantly been destroying that place, like first taking out.
And then leaving in terrible fashion.
Yeah, exactly. First taking out, I mean, all the various civilizations that were there before the Europeans arrived with their gunpowder and fancy boats.
Yeah. It's just crazy.
It was a different kind of life. People didn't have that technology. And I guess what we've learned is that whoever has the most kickin' technology is going to use it for weaponry and will dominate.
Yeah, that's just the way of things. There's a really interesting guy that I was following a while back named Caleigh. I think it's Acala, who is a English rapper, but I think he's got a PhD from Oxford or something like that. Maybe not, something like that. And he has a ton of good information on buried history of Africa. And it's just like crazy to me. It's like, so there's this continent that we're all from. There's challenges to that theory, but still that's the dominant theory. There's this continent that we're all from that goes back to the dawn of history with tons of civilizations in it. And it's just like, oh yeah, that doesn't matter. And by the way, it never impacted European history. We didn't get anything from Africa. Like they didn't have any ideas. And by the way, the richest person in human history, Mansa Musa, African. Oh yeah, he didn't exist. That wasn't a thing. He didn't help build the Silk Road. It's like you're not teaching people what's true, and you wonder why they behave so crazy.
No, and unfortunately, I mean, it's spurred this sort of the backlash where this sort of like Afro push to own Egypt.
Wait, what is that? I don't know about that.
Well, there's sort of like there's this battle about essentially it's sort of like the Nubian-ness of Egypt or the darkness of Egypt. And people are like, oh, Cleopatra was black.
Oh, you mean like Kemetic stuff? Like
Kemetic
tradition.
It's just like, maybe it's just easy considering I live in Canada, but like, who fucking cares?
I love that stuff. Are you kidding? That stuff is really interesting to me.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, but I mean, it's like, you don't need to get so hung up on like how dark her skin was. Was she a this or was she a that? It's just like, there's lots of civilizations. I think it's like, the thing is that the entire West African civilization and culture that was there before the slave trade and before, I guess, probably I don't even think they got touched by the Ottoman Empire, though. They never made it that far south because you got the stupid, Saudi, the Arabian Desert there, or whatever it is.
The Gobi Desert, whatever it's called.
No, the one in Africa, Sahara.
Sahara Desert, yeah. I don't know. I don't know. If I was.
But I mean,
If I was recovering my identity after hundreds of years of slavery, subjugation, and being told as Black people in America were that I didn't have a soul and I was only 3/4 human or whatever it was, and then I found out that there was actually a place I was from before that, I would be real fucking hung up about it, and I would be real into it.
No. That's not the point. But I mean, it's just like Timbuktu. There's a whole West African civilization that I think has been even more ignored, and it's just that Egypt has been held up as this place.
I see what you're saying.
African culture.
So you're saying like Egypt just is like people think of Egypt as that's Africa when it's just this tiny part of it. Okay,
exactly.
Got it.
Rather than having an appreciation for all kinds of cultures that existed all over the rest of Africa.
Gotcha. Yeah.
You know, and it's like those ones really got decimated. And also, I think partially because they weren't as white as Egypt is, and they don't have that Greek connection. Because the thing is that the Greeks connect to the Egypt. So people can sort of backhandedly trace a certain level of whiteness via the Greeks to the Romans, but backwards to Egypt.
Right.
If you get what I mean.
It's possible none of those people were white.
Well, right. But they weren't
this concept was overlaid on.
But they weren't really black either.
What do you mean by that?
Well, no, I'm saying it's like as a way of, because the slaves were brought from West Africa for the most part to Americas, they want to make sure that the West African culture, Benin, who used to have the best ironsmiths on the planet and various other places, that area gets no respect at all, culture, historically. Egypt is allowed to, because Egypt is close to the biblical land.
Well, Egypt is also part of the Islamic world now. And it's wrapped up in Israel. It's basically considered part of the Middle East. So
it is.
Yeah.
It is now. Which I think is maybe bad for Egypt.
How so?
I don't know. I just think it's like Egypt's a big place and it had its own culture, and by being too absorbed into this larger thing that you lose something. I don't mind. I'm really big on local culture, but it doesn't have to be hermetic. You know what I mean? It's like
hermetically sealed.
Yeah, it's like you don't have to be xenophobic to be a nationalist in a way.
What do you mean?
You could be really into your like local little traditions and still be welcoming of other people.
You mean basically
the two things aren't necessarily the same.
Right. People forget that. I mean, people forget Malcolm X was a black nationalist. And it's like you don't need to be exclusionary. I don't know. I mean, I am not, this is not my thing to comment on, Africa and what I think of it, other than I'm fascinated by it and I want to learn a lot more about it.
Yeah, I just think there's a lot of history of like the West African area, because that's where I lived when I was a little kid, right?
Wait, you lived in Benin?
I don't even remember because I was too little, but my dad thinks it affected me subconsciously.
In what way?
I lived there from when I was 6 months old until I was 2.5 years old. So it's like all my subconscious memories, all my memories that I can't access because they were too early in my life, basically, happened there. And then all my conscious stuff is in Canada. Interesting. But it always seems strange. And my brother's even feels more because he was 3 years older. So for him, like he feels odd as like this very white guy who, to him, fufu with spicy peanut soup is home cooking. Okay. And he looks, and it's like he hasn't lived there really since. But still, to him, because his earliest meals is whatever, it's like 3.5, 4.5 to 5. Yeah. Was this food. So that's his earliest food he ever ate was African food. Interesting. Because because we used to just eat whatever. My parents were like that.
African food is like super finger food, right? It's like Ethiopian
Very
food.
finger food, yeah.
But with West Africa, how different is West African food from Ethiopian? Like, do you do like the sponge thing that you pick stuff up with?
In the area that we lived in Ghana, it's more they do a loaf. It's like a loaf of fufu, which is usually they would make it out of potato, but traditionally I think it's cassava or plantain, like green plantains pounded until you have like this lump of just sort of like weird rubbery doughy stuff. And then you like pluck off a little piece and then do the dip and eat thing.
African food's like a lot of yams, beans, and peanuts, stuff like that.
Yeah, a lot of peanuts.
Yeah.
Peanuts, palm oil, a lot of fish too, because there's a good coastline of Ghana. Amazing surfing, apparently.
Oh. Damn.
Ghana's supposed to have wicked surfing.
I would love to go there, except I have a friend who went there during college and came back with malaria. And I'm like, ooh.
To Ghana?
Yeah, to Ghana. Yeah, for a year.
Weird.
Yeah. I think she was out in like the rural areas, I think. So.
Yeah, but I mean, wasn't she taking her pills?
The malaria pills only prevent symptoms. They don't prevent you from getting it. And they're also awful. They give you insane nightmares. The only point of malaria pills is to give you enough time to get to the hospital. You can't, there's no cure for malaria as far as I know. I could be, if I'm wrong, somebody can hopefully let me know.
Yeah, isn't Bill Gates, I thought that was Bill Gates' thing.
Well, that's why it's such a problem. I mean, that's why he's doing insane things like putting out robot mosquitoes to kill the other
that's
ones.
What they're doing. Yeah. They're sterilizing the mosquitoes and putting them out.
Yeah.
Which seems like, wow, a little dangerous for an ecosystem, let me say.
What was it? He was like, this was like right during, I think it was during COVID or right before. He was driving, he had people with vans driving through the South releasing genetically modified mosquitoes to kill the other ones. I'm like, wow, that sounds like a great idea. You know what else sounds like a great idea? Blocking out the sun with microfilm, which is another one of Bill Gates' genius ideas to prevent global warming. So to put the world into eternal darkness, like Mr. Burns blocking out the sun. Great plan, Mr. Bill. Thank you.
He's trying.
He is trying. You got to give him that. He's probably having a lot of successes in various areas too. And I think that, man, if they can wipe out malaria, that would be good.
Yeah. No.
We'll see.
I mean, yeah. I mean, malaria is still like basically one of the most virulent and dangerous diseases out there, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like if you look at like things that will kill you, like mosquitoes are like this. Mosquitoes have killed more than anything else on Earth. And it's like mosquitoes. And then like way down here, it's the AK-47. And then way down, it's like everything else. Like the AK-47 has killed ungodly amounts of people. And then hippos.
Yeah.
They're actually above AK-47s.
Yeah, hippos are pretty dangerous.
Well, we covered a lot of territory in this podcast. Did we drop any threads, or I think we went all over the known universe from the subatomic to the hippos?
Yeah. This was nice. This felt like a slightly more lighthearted chit chat.
The world needs lighthearted these days. I think.
I think we do.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much, but mostly I've just been focused on the UFO thing because I'm just like my mind is just blown that it's like it's so far out there and it's tantalizingly close somehow now. It's like, what the?
Do you think that we will see proof of extraterrestrial life in our lifetimes?
I don't. Maybe we already did.
Maybe. Well, did you see that like weird cocaine dusted mummy that like they were looking at the White House?
Yes. No.
What the hell is this? Like, talk about not inspiring. Talk about not inspiring confidence in the government. It's like literally we're on the brink of World War III, and you guys are sitting around looking at this cocaine dusted mummy like you're in the movie Idiocracy. It's like, come on, please.
Well, were those ever debunked? Actually,
was it ever bunked?
No.
Was it ever bunked in the first place? It's so silly.
So there were three very distinct mummies. Okay. There's one mummy that was a woman who had been mutilated and modified into a thing. There was
it was a human body that had been modified.
Yeah, like a young child whose fingers had been taken off, whether it was during life or not, or whether she was a three-fingered kid. I can't remember. Anyways, that was from one place. There was another mummy from another place that looked like it was pieced together bones of this and that. But I thought there were legit ones, three, the little ones that they actually did analysis. And the closest taxonomy I thought was turtle. The genetic taxonomy, the closest thing was a turtle on it. And yeah, I thought one of the analysis was like, no, actually, this looks like it's an actual thing. Who knows what the hell this is? But whatever it is, it's a thing.
If the cocaine-dusted mummies turn out to be real aliens, I will eat my words. I'll be impressed.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem likely to me right now. I'll just put it that way.
No. The one thing I'm very convinced is that all the most evil, darkest abduction, etc. stuff, almost certainly done by the U.S. government. That's all we know.
Yeah. No, my feeling.
Because I mean, who's got the experience?
Who's got the motivation? Yeah, it's like if I was ever like my basic feeling about aliens is all of the quote unquote UFOs are probably secret military spy planes and or spy planes from other countries or just classified craft. And I've seen classified craft flying around in 29 Palms and places like that, Joshua Tree. And then all of people's, like, I think a lot of what people think are alien abduction experiences are pretty clearly sleep paralysis. And then a lot of other ones, then first of all, you have to rule out any extenuating factors like mental illness or drug use. There's a lot that don't have that, though. There's a lot of very plausible ones. So, my feeling about aliens is that they exist, but they're not from space. They exist sideways to here, as in kind of what you were saying with the phase thing, which was really interesting to me, because I think absolutely if you do Crowleyan, you do thelemic magic or Typhonian or something like you can definitely have experiences that appear to be talking to aliens in altered states of consciousness. Whether they're valid or not, well, that's no one's ever going to think they're valid. Is it valid for you? That's up to you. But you absolutely can have the experience of talking to aliens on drugs and magic. The only question is it from your brain or is your brain picking up something on another frequency?
Yeah, but you think so? Really? I don't know.
Really what?
So you think that all of the physical object UFOs are human crafted devices?
That is my current reading of it. That's the answer that I feel about aliens does not violate rationality. Now, that said, if more information comes out, I'll revise my model anytime.
That's why
I could be wrong.
That's why I stuck with no, they can't be aliens because everything is too far. That makes no sense. I was more inclined to believe that they were a species from like underwater who then started to come up on the earth to explore and found out that the earth is plagued by these weird monkeys. And
that's also a possibility. In the 80s, there was a whole theory that dinosaurs evolved into saurian humans that live in the middle of the earth. So that was an actual theory. It wasn't a crazy theory. It was proposed. And there were pictures mocked up of dinosaur aliens that scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. So
like anything like that seemed more plausible to me too than like coming from any place else, and because distances are far, and that's a really big thing. It's almost easier to step sideways in space time than to travel 200 billion light years.
Well, my feeling about aliens is that people have been, like you were saying, people have been interacting with beings like this or reporting abduction experiences for all of human history. They just called them different things, fairies, changelings. I mean, the whole alien abduction story is the exact same as the fairy abduction story from earlier. Fairies took you to fairyland, but then they put you back with something different about you, which in the fairy stories...
Sometimes there would be a time thing too.
And then there was a time thing, right? Like Rip Van Winkle. But it's like, you would come back, but you would have a magic stone in you. That's the same as the aliens. You come back with an implant, So I think that these are cultural glosses on a much deeper human experience, which is probably non-physical and in the realm of conscious and unconscious. Like I think aliens aren't necessarily physical, but I think they exist in the realm of consciousness. Now, whether they're from extraterrestrial or they're terrestrial, or they're just something projected by your human mind, that's another question, but I think that's generally my feeling about it.
But if they leave you with a stone, if they create physical effects,
well,
then...
Have you ever seen anything non-physical create a physical effect? That's an actual question. It's not a leading question.
Yeah. Well, is light physical?
Yeah. There's light particles,
Then,
photons.
yeah.
Consciousness is physical. You just can't touch it with your hands.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, that's a big debate about the conscious physicality of consciousness.
I just mean in the sense of neurons are physically firing in your physical brain to create a physical illusion of consciousness.
Yeah. And we're pretty sure it's like, if we stopped all the brain activity, that the consciousness will not be happening anymore.
That's all I'm saying. It's a biophysical phenomenon. So
yeah,
up to a certain point, beyond which is Deepak Chopra.
See, that's the thing. It's like, wait, how can something physical create a non-physical? But therefore, if you're coming back from the aliens with an implant, that implant is physical.
Did I ever show you my implant?
Therefore, the aliens are physical.
Right here, on top of my ear.
Oh, really?
Yep, it's right here.
When did you get that?
I've had it since I was a kid. I don't know.
Oh, really?
I didn't notice it till later. Next time I see you, I'll show you.
Crazy.
Yep.
Have you had an X-ray or anything?
No, but it's the exact same size and shape and density as alien implants that are reported in all the literature in same location.
Sort of like grain of sandish thing, and I mean grain of rice.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is, like a little metal grain of rice.
Yeah.
Or it could just be cartilage, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not in the other ear.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing. There are some I'm not inclined to go for this simulation theory. I think it's just the laziest shit in the world.
We were just talking about that multiverse theory. It's just like, come on.
Oh my God.
Leave it in the Marvel movies, please. It's
like, didn't we do that in high school? Wasn't that first year philosophy or something like that?
Yeah.
Can we just we have to start demanding a little bit more from our realities to consider them reality.
One thing I realized that is really important for the people to understand is that people, and when I say people, I mean even journalists, don't understand the difference between a scientific theory and a hypothesis. Like the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics is just a hypothesis. They're like, why did this happen? Maybe
it's not a theory by a long shot, because
a theory is a tested hypothesis.
You can't test it, so it's like
a theory. Theory basically means it's been accepted. Hypothesis is and all the multiverse thing is they did the double slit experiment in quantum physics, and then they were like, what the fuck? Why did this happen? And then they came up with about 30 different scenarios for why it could have happened, including really crazy ones like the multiverse, because why not consider everything? And then that got reported in the media, and people ran with it as if it's actually real. It's just a hypothesis. It's a thought experiment.
No.
Same with this, everything's a virtual reality that Elon is doing or whatever.
Exactly. Whereas there are also simultaneously painfully prosaic classical explanations.
Yeah, nobody wants those. Nobody wants the prosaic stuff.
Nobody wants the prosaic stuff. I know.
They want cocaine, mummy, aliens.
I'm now so all about it. It's just I think I like the prosaic. The prosaic is very reliable.
I agree.
Physical things happening, man, causality, it's so
pretty awesome.
Reliable.
It's pretty awesome.
It's pretty awesome. It's it's so reliable. I throw this knife, and if I throw it the same way, it always lands at the same spot and sticks. It's
this is really interesting.
Doesn't turn into a potato halfway through the throw. It doesn't
yet. So far. Yeah, I was thinking a fairly simplified thought a couple days ago where I realized the difference between rational and magical thinking in a historical sense. It's like modern thinking is cause and effect, scientific method based. What cause do I do to do X effect? Magical thinking, and by magical thinking, I mean Renaissance, classic magic, Cornelius Agrippa that became the Golden Dawn and Kabbalah and all that is thinking by analogy, right? It's like a heart is like, or rather like a sunflower is like the sun, is like the color yellow, is like gold, is like the number 6. It's like finding correspondences in nature, which is where we get all those tables from. It's like basically
what you want is,
and that they can affect each other, It's like, like a rose is like a love poem. So like in a sense, they're like connected and can affect each other. It's like magical thinking.
Yes, but both are very important, I think, because the scientific gives you the cause and effect, gives the complete chain of the things. But the analogy is how you can draw. Analogies is more like the machine learning, finding patterns thing.
Yes, that's very interesting. That's
Because
interesting.
it's much more
yes.
like.
Yes.
And I think of like when I was talking to a friend of mine about.
It's also much more like the neurodivergent brain.
Well, it's allowing us to think. It's like, how am I going to think this? Oh, I'm going to model this like using fluids or something. I'm going to describe it like this. And poetry is, in a way, I think, metaphor. And Jonathan Gerard, I guess he's a mathematician. He works with Stephen Wolfram at Wolfram Alpha and stuff. He's like genius guy. Anyways, doing all this connection stuff. But I think they came up with this too. It's like, in a weird way, metaphor is the most accurate, in a strange way, the most accurate way of describing things.
Yeah.
Because you're making an analogy, and the analogies are like flows that are of a similar nature. So therefore you can have one thing is like another thing, like every flower is like every flower in a bunch of ways. Like there's a bunch of things like this, like cells and identity. It's like, what do you have? You have a skin, and then you have a skin that's separated from the rest of the world. Something hits this skin. This skin mediates that input, causes something to happen inside that's sort of black boxy inside the cell. Then the cell reacts, which we still don't even know really what's going on. And then the cell then gives its action, which is what we perceive as its response to this. The consciousness happens inside the cell. With us, we have our epithelium, which is like a double layer, similar skin. We have our nerve inputs come into our being. We process it, and then we have our agency in later. Like there's a lot of things like this that are analogous, is the only way to really approach to get a gestalt.
Yeah. No, you're correct. You're correct.
The processes that are similar. But then you need causality for the details of the mechanisms of that.
Right. And
because otherwise you're just relying on the gods to have somehow.
Well, you need causality in order to replicate the cause to get the effect. And so, but as you were saying that, I was thinking like, yeah, no, I mean, as demonstrated by the fact that people will learn and retain information way better if they hear it in a story or a movie or a comic, as opposed to like a dry text on something. So
again, to the pedagogy thing.
Okay.
Well, like this a notion of like teaching people better in a way of like verses or whatever it is, so that they will retain these things, so they can get these ideas, not in a dry book where it's just like this thing that's just, people want to see something demonstrated.
Yeah.
Like I want to teach kids Pythagorean theorem. I go outside and I say, hey, let's figure out how we can tell how tall any given tree is, how tall any given building is.
Oh, and then you actually go do it?
Yeah, and then you go outside with a little protractor and a little string and pull out a sextant thing, calculate a couple of angles, SOHCAHTOA, boom. Kids are like, what?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I wish things were taught like the number one thing that kids say in school is, when are we ever going to, like, what's the point? When are we going to use this? Why? Well, show them why. Show them why. It's a valid question. Don't ignore it. It's a valid question. If you show them why, then they'll remember and use it. Otherwise, 100%. It's in and out. It's like, I don't like, so this brings us back to the school system thing, where it's just like, we just know more now, and we live in a different world that has the internet and AI. We live in a world where kids can get on Wikipedia and immediately know more than their teacher about anything.
Yeah.
And we're going to use the same school model. Also, like, I think about this a lot. The amount of, I don't know how it is in Canada, but in the US, if you go through the public school system, meaning publicly funded in the US, then the one that almost everyone goes through, you really don't get a whole lot of information. They stretch out math over several years. They stretch out reading a few books over several years. You don't really walk out of school with a whole lot. In the US, they don't even teach you how to do taxes. So or balance a checkbook usually or anything like that.
Yeah.
No life skills. So it's just like, well, and you don't think there's an issue with that? I mean, we live in a faster society now.
I don't know. I mean, my belief is that most kids could probably be at first year university level by grade 10 or 11, easy, if they were just like fed the information at a decent actual pace that challenged them. And that way you can do, I mean, there needs to be a lot more streaming. There needs to be a lot more physical modeling of concepts, all these things. I think it's just like the approach we've taken has gotten so distant from physicality. And I really think we need a big move back towards that, because there's an understanding that I think you get when you see physical processes go on that is just, there's the density of information is very high. When you're reading a word, the information in that word is basically confined exactly to the codification of that. When you watch some chemicals mixed together and then combine and change color and the crystals fall out or whatever, there is, like, what you're watching is bazillions of bits of information acting out their reality in front of you. And how well you pay attention is how much information you can get out of that sort of thing. Like, it's not parsed out in these tiny little fragments.
Yeah.
It's sort of like it's an experience.
Yep.
And we're going to help guide what you can absorb from this experience.
Yeah. And I feel like then when you're actually in it, then you just absorb by osmosis. I mean, the most basic example that I can think of would be like trying to learn French out of textbooks for 5 years, as I did with very little success, rather than just going and living in France for a month.
Right. Yeah.
Like, context is everything.
Oh yeah. I lived in Costa Rica for 5 months, and basically, like, I'm now reasonably fluent in Spanish, because it's like I was living in the middle of freaking no place.
That's great. That's great.
I didn't have a choice. I spent all day with my little dictionary,
That's great.
And at night making verb conjugations to get some practice in.
The best way
I butcher it all to hell, but at least it's something.
The best way to learn anything is having to. And that's not somebody forcing you. It's like realizing, like, I got to learn this, or else, like, I'm not going to get a job or whatever. Or I'm not going to be able to talk to anyone in the middle of Costa Rica. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I loved teaching the wilderness survival stuff, like the nature bushcraft. Because it's just completely 100% prosaic. It's just, this is a real thing.
That's what people need.
This is actually like a real situation that you might run into. And what are we going to do with real objects that you might find? Because we're not bringing a bunch of goofy, like a roll of knives. That's all you got. That's all we get. Maybe a striker to start a fire. If we can't build it with a knife, then we suck. And we're going to be really cold, aren't we? So let's figure this out.
I love that. Yeah, I'm sure pretty much every teacher who really is invested in their job. There's a lot. And I mean, I feel like you'd have to actually have at this point, you'd have to have intrinsic motivation to be a teacher, because you're signing on for what you're signing on for. But I think that I'm sure there's teachers want to do so much and probably know what their kids need. They just can't get the funding, or the administration won't approve it or whatever. Now they're teaching a standardized test.
The entire nature of the structure is so inflexible that it doesn't allow for that. I mean, why? It's funny. It's like, why all through the 80s especially, but it's like, it's like the weird misfit who's just going to break the rules. And it's like, no, because this is the way it needs to be done to get done, and that seems to have that had its time. It seems to somehow faded in that cultural gestalt.
Well, things have improved. I mean, like a couple days ago, I was reading about Percy Shelley, and Percy Shelley had a very similar experience to Jen in public school in England, which is privately funded, like the good old boys schools, where I guess there's that institution, or there was an institution that's like that movie If in British schools, where like the older boys are allowed to basically like use the younger ones as slaves, including sexual slaves if they want. And that's considered to be their like reward for having had to do it when they were freshmen.
Yeah.
And Percy Shelley was, forced to do this and, polish people's boots and things like this. And then basically just rebelled against it and got into a shit ton of trouble. Jen also did the same thing. And I think when Jen became a senior, or whatever the word for that is, refused to take it out on the freshmen or abuse the freshmen, which no one had done before. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing. That's something that the boomers, like I was posting on Twitter, people are all anti-boomer now. It's like, that's something the boomers did. They ended a lot of that stuff. Corporal punishment, segregation. It's like people really, like, you read about some of like the child raising practices when Reich was writing, like what he was reacting to, or like how the
when I went to school, when I was at boarding school in England in the 70s, still, I mean, you'd get the shoe was the first, for your first offense, you'd get your ass spanked with a shoe. You might just get, I mean, if the teacher's just walking around the room and you're goofing at your desk, expect to get your knuckles wrapped with a ruler. I mean, what do you think? Like that was just expected. On the other hand, we literally were firing broken paper clips in our teachers' heads. So.
Yeah, no, I did so much stuff in high school. I probably would have been put in Guantanamo for now. Like we would make bombs and stuff. It was bad.
The kind of behavior that was acceptable back in the 70s is just literally insane and should not be allowed.
At my high school, the senior year, I think the freshman water polo team or something like that put one of the teacher's VW bugs on the roof of the school in the middle of the night somehow. And so everyone came in and the car was on the top of the roof. Like, can you imagine now? It's just like...
I know. Animal House wasn't that fictional.
Oh, no, not at all.
At a time, it wasn't that fictional.
Yeah. Well, we have done a 2-hour and 45-minute podcast. I got to edit this and go eat some food.
Good luck with that.
Yes. This was a great podcast. Thank you this is your third time on. This is great.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
It's good to see you.
You too. Anything you want to tell the audience on your YouTube channel or other stuff, places to find you online?
Yeah, let's see. There's YouTube channel. I'm on Twitter. I think Caleigh Fisher or Caleigh Fisher everywhere because I can't be bothered.
But you
handles
on your Twitter. It's spelled Kali, right? You spell it a couple different ways.
Yeah, I think usually on most sites it's the KALIFISSURE.
Okay.
Spelling. And Tumblr as well. I still tumble. I love Tumblr.
How is Tumblr
I
these
think
days?
Tumblr is still like an unsung, really great platform.
Really?
In a way. Yeah. Especially for like, I mean, it's very meme-ish, but it's sort of like, it reminds me of, it's like Twitter if Twitter was less dialogue-y and more content-y.
Yeah.
Like a lot more images and GIFs stuff, and with some dialogue, but more short form things like that, but not such conversational. It's more like just getting your feed of cool pictures and news, and like I have like fuck yeah fluid dynamics, a couple of physics ones and some art ones. Yeah, that's like a channel name. Fuck yeah, Fluid Dynamics.
Nice. All right. Well, nature's calling, so I'm going to hop off the call. It was wonderful to see you, and I love you a lot. Okay. Say hi to anyone you see.
Come visit.
I don't even people I don't know. Say hi.
Okay. Hi.
All right. Hope you really, really enjoyed that. I definitely had a lot of fun in that conversation. Meet us at magick.me, magick.me, my school for magic, meditation, and mysticism, where you can learn all the skills you need to unleash your true self. I will see you in class, and until next time, hang in there.